So, let's read through this Wired article, which will give a lot of important context. Hi, Nix the Wolf. Before we get into the hearing, which I really want to give some context so everyone is familiar with it. He's checking his RSS feeds. Oh, I think he's checking his RSS feeds. All right. Well, how does one masturbate with pants on, Anna? You put your hand under the rim, or you just like do it over. Like, this is not rocket science. Actually, it's the opposite. It's penis science or pussy science. Or like you might be one of those people that got the surgery that lets you have the penis and the pussy, which I think is really cool. Like, a lot of people don't realize like they made like Fudanari real. Like, you can go get Fudanari if you'd like to. Like, it's you can pick it up at the store. You know, I think that's really cool. It's like how like we all like when we were growing up, we saw all that like movies where like people are wearing VR headsets, and now we can do that for real life. Like, that's what that bottom surgery is like. It's like, oh, I thought this was just a thing that like that was in anime and manga, but like I could have that like right now. Like, maybe not literally right now. Like, it takes 6 to 12 to 24 months, but I forget what it's called. But it's pretty base surgery. Okay. I got 10 minutes. The FTC warns big tech companies not to apply the Digital Services Act. FTC Chairman Andrew Ferguson. We're going to turn this down. It's got a little loud out of nowhere. Oh, the FTC Chairman Andrew Ferguson wrote a scathing letter to companies including Google, Meta, and Apple, telling them to not apply the DSA if it jeopardizes the freedom of Americans. The FTC has been paying attention to this issue generally, and I think that the FTC is going to start being a bigger player into the pay pro censorship issue over time, but I think in a very like slow-moving way. I don't expect like them to come in swinging anytime soon. Trouble is brewing for the Digital Services Act, the landmark European law governing big tech platforms. On August 21st, the Federal Trade Commission sent a scathing letter to a number of tech giants, including Google, Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, and Apple. The letter's subject, the European Digital Services Act, cannot be applied if it jeopardizes freedom of expression and, above all, the safety of U.S. citizens. The opening of the letter, signed by FTC Chairman Andrew Ferguson, features a prominent reference to the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, namely freedom of speech. Online platforms have become central to public debate, and the pervasive online censorship in recent years has outraged the American people. Not only have Americans been censored and banned from platforms for expressing opinions and beliefs not shared by a small Silicon Valley elite, but the previous administration actively worked to encourage such censorship. I'm expecting rhetoric like this to appear in this hearing, by the way. Don't expect the words like Steam and itch.io and queer art to show up. The Trump administration's lunge. The Trump administration intends to reverse course, and it is in this direction that the attack on quote-unquote foreign powers, the EU and in the UK, and particularly on the Digital Services Act and the OSA, begins. The letter also indirectly references GDPR, the European regulation on the protection of personal data, whose measures are, quote, aimed at imposing censorship and weakening end-to-end encryption, with the result of a weakening of Americans' freedoms, according to the letter. Privacy and end-to-end encryption, the issues on the table. In the letter, the U.S. Antitrust Authority specifically asked the 13 companies to report how they intend to comply with incorrect international regulatory requirements. The deadline for scheduling a meeting was set for August 28th, and recalled their, quote, obligations towards American consumers under Section 5 of the FTC Act, which prohibits unfair or deceptive acts or practices that could distort the market or compromise safety. And it is precisely on the security front, and especially on the adoption of end-to-end encryption, that the FTC calls big tech companies to order. Companies that promise that their service is secure and encrypted but fail to use end-to-end encryption where appropriate may deceive consumers who reasonably expect this level of privacy. Furthermore, quote, certain circumstances may require the use of end-to-end encryption, and failure to implement such measures may constitute an unfair practice. The weakening of encryption or other security measures to comply with laws or requests from a foreign government may therefore violate Section 5 of the Federal Trade Commission Act, the document states. In a tweet on X, Ferguson wrote flatly that, quote, if companies censor Americans or weaken privacy and communication security at the request of a foreign power, I will not hesitate to enforce the law. In a global society like the one we live in a society, overlaps and interferences between different legal systems are natural. Just think of those in the opposite direction between European privacy legislation and the famous American Cloud Act. Guido Scorza, is it Guido? Scorza, a member of the Italian Protection Authority, told Wired. Scorza believes that in the event of significant discrepancies, it will be up to the U.S. government and the European Commission to identify corrective measures capable of guaranteeing the sovereignty, including digital, of each country. A lot of you probably saw that our boy Nigel Farage of Reform, who somehow ended up slightly to the left of Keir Starmer on trans women in women's prisons. We live in like fucking wacko world, dude. He somehow was like was a little more like I'm talking like pixels left of Keir Starmer on that issue. But he's gonna show up. We're gonna see his dumb fuck face at this thing. And so Neil Farage vows to repeal Britain's dystopian Online Safety Act. Reform UK says new law aimed at protecting children from harmful content would, quote, make Xi Jinping blush. I don't think that's true. I don't think he's gonna blush. I think like he would be like, that's kind of tame. Reform UK has vowed to repeal the OSA after regulators began to enforce its new age verification powers, decrying the law as a dystopian threat to free speech that would make China's president, quote-unquote, blush. Neil Farage, whose Reform UK party is leading Labour and the Conservatives in the polls, said on Monday that the legislation was already altering people's social media feeds and was an example of governmental overreach. Millions of people have noticed what they're getting on their feeds is different to what it was just last week, Farage said. It begins to look as though state suppression of genuine free speech may be upon us already. Thousands of sites offering adult content, as well as popular social media apps including X, Reddit, and TikTok, have introduced new age checks for UK users since Friday to comply with the OSA. The controls are designed to prevent children under the age of 18 from accessing sites that carry pornography as well as other material that relates to self-harm, eating disorders, or suicide. The act, passed under the previous Conservative government in 2023, is being enforced in phases by media regulator Ofcom, which can impose steep penalties up to imprisonment for breaches. Child safety campaigners have pushed governments around the world to make tech companies go further to protect minors from stumbling across pornography or other offensive material on their apps and sites. Critics say social media companies and other digital content platforms have for many years profited from a light-touch regulatory regime compared with traditional broadcast media. U.S. President Donald Trump, who met UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer on Monday, joked, "Would you please uncensor my site?" when asked if he was happy about new powers here to censor Truth Social, his social media platform. "Oh, can you uncensor my site now?" Trump said that he did not believe Starmer would censor it because I only say good things. Starmer interjected, saying the legislation would protect children from websites that, for example, encourage suicide. We're not censoring anyone. But at a joint press conference, senior Reform Party figure Zia Yusuf argued that the act gave ministers power to force regulators to rewrite the rules on, quote, what speech social media companies must censor, and claimed the UK was sliding towards, quote, dystopia. That is a pretty terrifying thing for a single individual to have. In fact, it's the sort of thing that Xi Jinping himself would blush at the concept of. Why do they want to make Xi Jinping blush so bad? They want Xi to get flustered. It's so funny. It does absolutely nothing to protect children. What it does is suppress freedom of speech in this country and really force social media companies to censor anti-government speech. Uptake of virtual private networks, internet services that disguise the user's online location, has surged since the last provisions came into force, the Financial Times reported at the weekend. Yusuf warned that the act risked forcing young people onto the so-called dark web, where he warned there was material that was, quote, every parent's nightmare, like Bitcoin and also child pornography, that too, actually. Elon Musk in recent days has shared X posts criticizing the UK's regime, including by the far-right activist Tommy Robinson, who posted a link to a petition to repeal the act, which has received nearly 350k signatures. Important to note that the UK basically told them to go suck eggs. For the 350k that signed that. Farage denied that the party's stance was designed to fawn to Musk, the world's richest man and the owner of X. Musk had once looked set to bankroll reform before a falling out over the Tesla owner's insistence, the party ally with Robinson, who has been jailed several times. You gotta hang out with my friend in the can, though. Like, this is really important. Like, you need to be buddies with my friend in the can. If you're not buddies with my friend in the cans, this ain't gonna work. And Reform was like, yeah, we like to generally win elections, so we're not gonna do that. Okay, so this is coming up. Whoops. It's on the way. Let me read through chat. Sleepy Joe Dementia censored the internet. .flv 4K. I think we need a government funding like Tesla level into this pants on masturbation research. You just want to be paid to goon at home, which I respect, because like that's what I get paid to do. But on the government's teat, please, I can only get so bricked up. And did anyone else always think it was weird when people are like, you're living off the government's teat? I'm like, yeah, I'd love to live off the government's big, round, lactating teat. Future fragments going on sale on the 3rd, y'all. Not sponsored. Look at the front page. Oh, no. I'm going to be writing a little post about that because it's pretty based in Epic that Future Fragments is on sale. And it's pretty based in Epic. It's a pretty based in Epic project. And I am going to write a small thing after the stream. So they're in debt because they wanted to create such an amazing product with a lot of hard work put into it. So essentially with that project, right? Let me get the specific information up. Blah, 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 blah. Like specifically, they put a ton of their own money into the game and they're like 80K in debt because of it. And that's not like, that has nothing to do with like, did they use their money like, you know, like in the way that they should or whatever. No, like this is a very common indie game development story where like you want to create a really good product. You put a lot into it, a lot of money into it. And I'm going to make this point. I don't want to make it too hard because I don't want to like put a massive spotlight on Future Fragments in the media journalism realm because I feel like I'm nervous about like them being ever affected by like collective shout style censorship stuff. But I do feel, thank you for the follow. I do feel personally like thanks again, Goblin Idol Thoxa. I like your name. I feel like if it was a safe for work project, and they talked about those money numbers, everyone would be talking about that. Everyone would be talking about Future Fragments and the money that they are in debt for because they wanted to create like this really high-end product that has a lot of like hard work put into it. I'm talking about like a ton of really good music, a ton of really good voice actors. It is a full-blown like game. You know what I mean? Like it is an adult game, but it's like, it's kind of low-key what Subverse was trying to be, is the way I would actually describe Future Fragments. Like, low-key, what Subverse was trying to be in 3D, this game is for Metroidvania adult games. And, you know, the mainstream games press is gonna fucking ignore it, and which sucks shit. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about that. Like, if it was any other game, like, games journalists would be tripping over themselves to talk about, like, this enormously, you know, this enormously high-end product with a lot of hard work put into it that its team is in debt for. But, you know, Aftermath's not going to fucking write about it. Oh! That was perfectly timed, Seraph. Future Fragments is going on sale today, right before Silksong. You're such an inspo as a journalist and activist against the censorship BS. Love your content. Thank you, Goblin Ida Thoxa. I appreciate that. Lewd Silksong, kind of literally, though. Suck song. Suck song. Who's up sucking their song? You know what I'm saying? I'm commissioning an oil painting of President Xi blushing. Yeah, old man Yaoi, rise up. China rising. It's the century of Chinese prosperity. It's Xi's world. We're just living in it. That's how it works. Sleepy Joe Dementia censored the internet. We would never do this. Trans and LGBTQ people are not people, so there's no censoring how today's hearing is gonna go. By the way, I've got the hearing on live. Like, it's just hasn't started yet. They're probably still doing prep. I don't think Trump is gonna be there, but it'd be very funny if we saw Trump and he's like trying to keep it together again, like yesterday. I buy into the theory that I believe that Trump did in fact have a stroke. I think that seems pretty obvious. they're delaying worse than a Nintendo Direct. Maybe Neil Farage is gonna announce Metroid Prime 5. Subverse takes a drag. Have not heard that name in a while. Was it ever finished? I think it's still in production. It's not. Oh, I think the thing with Subverse is that they promised very hard. They promised a lot, and there's a lot that unfortunately they were not going to be able to do as their first game. It's very hard to come on the market, and with your first game, and have massive ambitions and fulfill those ambitions successfully. It's really hard, and I think that's sort of where Studio FOW is. I think it suffered a little bit from the Cyberpunk 2077 effect, where people thought it was going to be much more immersive and crazy, crazy, amazing, awesome, blockbuster tier adult game. And Studio FOW is really good at what they do animation wise. They're good at animation and stuff. But I think it just overpromised, under-delivered a little bit. There's a lot about it that's really good. I think there's a lot of good sex animations. I think the voice acting's really good. I believe their VA list is kind of stacked, high key, I think, right? Let me double check. Who's their voice actors again? It's high key stacked. Yeah, who's on it again? Let me see. They got, Bakusa Tosho. They have Bordeaux Black. They've got, let's see, who else? Blah, 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 blah. They got Pixie Willow for FOW-chan. They've got a lot of good names on that's connected to. It's just it's just really hard. Really hard, huh? I think the problem for Studio FOW is that their Kickstarter probably blew up in a way that they weren't expecting. And I think their eyes were a little bit bigger than their stomachs in terms of what they could actually deliver. So they kind of suffered from success in the sense that their Kickstarter massively passed initial expectations. And they had these very ambitious ideas for what Subverse was going to be. And then when Subverse came out, it's actually a pretty decent adult game. But it's a decent adult game, and people were expecting this game was going to marry my daughter and fuck my mother. They thought it was going to be one of the best things that's ever come into the world. I don't know why I use that analogy. They thought it was going to be this amazing, amazing, amazing thing. And actually what Subverse ended up being was just pretty decent, which is very different from fucking incredible, it's a very different sort of thing. So I think that really screwed over Subverse. You will see some negative reviews for it as a result. I obviously put the screws on them a little bit for doing some work with Arch Warhammer. I think Arch Warhammer previewed the game. So I was a little bit yo, what's going on here, guys? What's up? Why are we doing this? And that kind of put me on the radar with Arch. He doesn't like me now. And of course, his friends don't like me. Although I think it's changing a little bit. I feel things are more neutral with me and Rima Evanstar these days compared to what they used to be. Because I don't really have as much beef with Rima. I've been owing her an apology. But anyway, because I feel I was kind of a dick to her on her own stream. I think overall, the Studio FOW folks, I don't think they're bad people or anything. I really do think that Subverse is innately a good thing for the adult industry. I think I was a little mean to them when I wrote about the game originally in my review. I was there's better, more queer adult games out there, and I think that's true. But you know what? I also respect hard work, and I think Subverse has a lot of hard work put into it. And I think it's really hard to be in Studio FOW's shoes. It is a suffering from success sort of thing. Anytime you have a Kickstarter and it massively goes over all expectations, you do kind of get fucked a little bit. Especially if you are setting high standards for yourself on your debut game. So My thinking is, let Studio FOW cook. I'm sure the end result of Subverse will be a pretty decent game, that all things considered, not bad. There's really good voice acting work. I mean, I really like Pixie Willow, for example. I think she's a very talented VA. I think most people in the industry look up to her significantly. And I think Subverse is going to end up being a decent game by the time it comes out. As you can tell, my feelings on like criticizing adult devs have significantly cooled. As I mentioned on Blue Sky, I'm still talking because this thing hasn't started yet. It's 8 minutes in. It's crazy. It's important to remember that a lot of times, like, these companies also need to take who they get to talk to for promotion, because, you know, the Aftermaths of the world, the Polygons of the world and stuff like that are not really going to cover their games. So I'm also a little bit more like empathetic to like devs saying like, yeah, I'll do a preview of Arch Warhammer. Oh, here we go. I believe it's about to start. Yeah, it's starting. Okay. Whoa.
Committee will come to order without objection. The chair is authorized to declare recess at any time. We welcome everyone to today's hearing on Europe's threat to American speech and innovation. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Alabama to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of Trump, for which it stands, one nation, under Trump, indivisible, with Trump and Trump for Trump. Europe. Come to order. Come to order. Who's up coming to their order? It's me, because I got that extra.
The chair is now recognized for an opening statement. And then we will move to our to the ranking member's opening statement, and then our witnesses will get 5 minutes. I want to just take an opportunity, maybe before I even do an opening statement.
The branding off that water bottle.
Hope everyone had a good break. The ranking member and I, along with a few other members, Mr. Kiley, Mr. Fitzgerald, Mr. Brea,
love McCriddles,
Mr. Swallow, and Ms. Crockett all had a wonderful visit to, and Mr. Cohen.
So true, fakest.
To Europe, where we talked about this issue, and we learned some valuable information then. So we look forward to today's hearing and hearing from our witnesses. But first, you got to listen to the chairman and the ranking member talk.
How's the sound?
On August 12th
of
last year, Thierry Breton wrote Elon Musk a letter. Thierry Breton's the commissioner in charge of enforcement of the Digital Services Act and the Digital Marketing Act. And the very first sentence,
no, good Homer.
The guy in charge of enforcing this legislation passed by the EU writes this: Dear Mr. Musk, I am writing to you
I'll
in
explain
the
it later,
context
Kirk. It's weird.
of recent events in the United Kingdom and in relation to the planned broadcast on your platform, X, of a live conversation between a U.S. presidential candidate and yourself. So think about it.
Think about it.
The guy in Europe in charge of enforcing a European Union law writes an American about an American company, about an American election, and he says the context for the letter, the reason for the letter, are events that are happening in the UK, a non-European Union country. That's not Europe trying to influence what happens here. I don't know what is. He goes on throughout the letter and says this: measures need to be taken to combat disinformation. He said this to Mr. Musk. We're concerned about any, quote, illegal content you may have. And he ends his letter by saying, my services and I, very last sentence, my services and I will be extremely vigilant to any evidence that points to breaches of the Digital Services Act and will not hesitate to make full use of our toolbox.
Yeah,
so
Musk
he ends
is
the letter with a threat. So before the interview takes place, he's threatening
regardless
an American running an American company about an interview regarding the most important election we
I believe
have,
he's like undocumented or something. I forget.
And again, saying the reason for doing so are events that are happening in a non-European Union country, the UK. Comments about events happening in the UK. Concerned about this, quote, spillover effect. That is why we're having today's hearing. That's why we went to Europe last month, or actually in July, to study this issue. Now, here's what's interesting. Mr. Breton, after he sends this letter, this committee sent him 2 letters, and then he suddenly resigns. We asked him to come today, but he refused to come. We asked him to send written testimony. He refused to do that. We asked him to appear. He refused. He just wouldn't come. I think it's important to remember what the House Judiciary Committee did last Congress. We investigated our government, the Biden administration, their attacks on free expression here in the United States. What Michael Schellenberger journalists called the censorship industrial complex. Big government, big tech, big media, big academia, all working together to censor Americans. And we learned all kinds of things in that investigation. We learned on April 27th of 2022 that the Biden administration had established a disinformation governance board. That's right. A bunch of bureaucrats going to get together and tell you what you can say, what you can tweet, what you can post, what you can read, what's misinformation, what's disinformation, and the new term they come up, what's malinformation. Thank goodness, because many of us raised concerns about that, they disbanded that disinformation governance board. We no longer had that.
Elon became an
We heard
American
from
citizen in 2002.
Journalists like Mr. Schellenberger, like Matt Taibbi.
I was reading.
The Twitter files. We heard from Tulsi Gabbard. We heard from RFK Jr., all Democrats, frankly. In fact, I took some heat for that.
Elon did have a bizarre visa history. He kind of fucked it up a little bit, but he did become a citizen in 2002. He's an American
When
officially.
RFK Jr. came in to testify, the Democrats actually made a motion to go to executive session. Kick everyone out. No journalists. No one was allowed. They wanted to kick everyone out, go to executive session so no one could hear what RFK Jr. was going to testify to in a hearing on censorship. You can't make this stuff up. We learned that on January 23rd. Think about that, by the way. We learned on January 23rd, 2021, maybe point this one out first, that there was an email. So the third day of the Biden administration, there was an email sent from the White House to Twitter which said, take down this tweet ASAP. And who had issued the tweet? Who had put out the tweet? RFK Jr. So you had the Biden administration trying to censor a fellow Democrat who was going to run against him in the Democrat primary. I mean, that is, and everything in that tweet actually were true statements.
True statement.
So we learned all that last year, and of course our investigation culminated with a letter from Mr. Zuckerberg on August 26, 2024 last year, where he said, yes, the Biden administration pressured us to censor. We did it. We're sorry, and we won't do it again. And Meta, Facebook, has now subsequently changed policy. They now go to the community notes policy instead of the, quote, independent fact-checker approach that was being used before. We had one other witness last Congress, journalist from Canada, Rupa Subramanya, who I thought said something that was really important. She said, free speech is a core value of Western culture. And that is true, and that's what our concern is. We're concerned about the attacks on free expression in Europe, the censorship, the arrest for offensive posts, the chilling effect it all has on speech, but we're more concerned, frankly, as Americans, about the limits the DSA, the Online Safety Act in the UK, put on Americans' First Amendment rights, and the shakedown, and I think that's the appropriate term, the shakedown of American tech companies under the DSA, the OSA, and the Digital Marketing Act Digital Markets Act in the European Union.
Rupa Subramanya is
These acts target our tech
writer.
companies that provide the modern town square, and they are the engines of innovation in our global economy. Since the turn of the century, European tech companies have languished behind their American counterparts. European governments have tried everything to change this except what might actually work, deregulating their own economy and letting free enterprise flourish. Instead of cutting red tape and allowing their own companies to innovate and grow, the EU and the UK are going after American companies that have grown to dominate the global tech landscape. Regulations like the EU's Digital Markets Act and the UK's Digital Markets Competition and Consumers Act impose burdensome requirements on US tech companies while leaving their European counterparts untouched. But these attacks on American companies won't result in a so-called European champion. Instead, China wins as Europe hurts both itself and America.
China wins.
They make the user experience worse,
Tell you what.
distort the digital marketplace by allowing less innovative and less efficient foreign
Censorship Chinese prosperity
foreign
begins now.
competitors to simply steal from U.S. tech companies. In addition to attacking American tech companies, Europe is attacking free speech around the world, including here in America. Laws like the Digital Services Act and the Online Safety Act are the engines of global censorship regime targeting political speech disfavored by European bureaucrats.
Okay.
The censorship mechanism is simple. The DSA and the OSA effectively require social media platforms to change their terms of service to moderate more content. These companies have one set of standards that they apply globally because it's costly, impractical, and harmful to user privacy to change content moderation rules based on a user's location. So when platforms are forced to change their terms of service to comply with European laws, it affects what we see, what we read, what we say online here in America.
Sure.
Infringing
yeah, I agree.
on Americans' First Amendment rights.
I do somewhat
This is
agree.
no accident. Even the New York Times, The Atlantic have acknowledged that these foreign censorship laws are intended to have global impact. And European actions have proven it.
Yeah.
Again, just look at Mr. Breton's letter. Supporters say these laws make the online environment safer for children, something that we all agree with. We all want to protect kids.
Agreed, Nix.
But censorship laws are never about disinformation or child safety or anything else. They're always about censoring criticism of the government. Social media is a relatively new technology, but censorship is as old as time.
Yeah.
Misinformation, disinformation, hate speech labels are always used by the people in power to censor their critics. And my experience has taught me that today's misinformation is
Him
tomorrow's
saying
truth.
that "think of the
We've seen
children"
it time and time
is
again.
a ploy.
I always like to point out
is going to be
everything
pretty
the
big
government
here.
told us about COVID
That's a pretty
turned out
big
to be wrong.
statement
Everything
for
our government told us.
a conservative to make.
Everything.
It means that the
told us
arguments are coming,
virus
the wheels are
didn't
coming
come
off a
from
little
lab.
bit, a little
Looks like
bit for
it did.
the
They told us it
think of the
was
children,
gain-of-function
right?
research done at the lab. Yes, it was. They told us it wasn't our tax money used at the
Somewhat.
lab. Yes, it was. They told us vaccines. They told us that the vaccinated can't get it. They told us the vaccinated can't transmit it. They told us masks work. They told us 6 feet social distance was based on science. And they told us this was the first virus in history where there's no such thing as natural immunity. They were 0 for 8. And yet they're going to define with some disinformation governance board what we can say, what we can
But
tweet,
what about the
we can read, what we can
vaccines? Tell you
post.
what.
You got to be kidding me. As RFK Jr. testified before our committee, never forgot what he said. He said, when you look at history, it is never the good guys who are for censorship. It is always the bad guys, and that's our concern. We need debate. The best way to answer bad speech, wrong speech, stupid speech, crazy speech, even hate speech is more speech. We need the First Amendment. Our committee will continue to move legislation that protects free speech from threats, including threats from abroad.
Okay.
With that, I now recognize our ranking member for his opening statement.
Attacking the think of the children is pretty
Thank
big.
you kindly, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to our witnesses. I imagine that in a hearing about threats to freedom of speech abroad, we might hear from a Russian dissident about Putin's massive violations of political freedom, or the death of Alexei Navalny in prison, or perhaps a Chinese pro-democracy activist about President Xi's attacks on free speech in Hong Kong, Tibet, Xinjiang, or the persecution trial of Jimmy Lai. Or maybe a journalist about the Saudi Crown Prince's assassination of Jamal Khashoggi,
she got a good fit.
the Washington Post writer who demanded freedom from religious persecution and oppression in Saudi Arabia. But no, the dictators of the world have got nothing to fear from this hearing. The Republicans called it to attack our democratic allies in Europe. The star witness is not a human rights leader like Navalny, but a far-right, pro-Putin politician who leads the UK Reform Party, a party that has 4 members out of 650 members in the parliament. He calls England an authoritarian regime, while saying that Vladimir Putin is the world leader he admires the most.
The Dems should not be carrying water.
This
Let's wait
hearing
for
mimics
this.
Vice President J.D. Vance, who went to the Munich Security Conference in February. In the first 2 minutes of his speech, whitewashed the world's leading autocratic regimes, proclaiming that the threat that worries him is not Russia. It's not China, he said, but rather it's our European allies. Amazing. Republicans are promoting far-right parties in Europe, like Alternative for Deutschland, Reform UK, and Rassemblement National Français, and ignoring massive repression in Russia, China, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and among all the autocrats of the world. Republicans are vilifying European liberal democracies simply for engaging in the kind of line-drawing exercises that we Americans engage in under our First Amendment with respect to the epidemic of child pornography, protecting children from other harmful content, defamatory speech, online scams and false advertising, and speech inciting riots and imminent lawless action.
This is not going to age well for Raskin.
Does not protect and whose tricky contours must still be drawn by law. We could have a meaningful hearing on this complicated subject, but this hearing is just a drive-by hit against a strong Democratic ally
No.
to benefit a
That's-
Donald Trump sycophant and wannabe.
That's
But it's
not
even worse than
entirely
this.
true.
Not only are our colleagues ignoring intensifying repression in the world's dictatorships, they're also trying to distract the world from the attack
agree,
on freedom
Desiree.
taking place right here in America every single day. Americans aren't worried about the EU or the Online Safety Act.
Yes,
in
they
the
are.
UK. We're not
We
worried
are.
about white nationalists not having enough license to incite lynch mobs to set immigrants on fire in their bedrooms.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Americans
Every
are
American
worried
is
that
upset
Donald
about
Trump
this.
is working to rewrite and whitewash American history in our museums, our textbooks, and our national parks, to destroy PBS, NPR, and public broadcasting, to ban books in our libraries,
Sure,
and
I
to
agree.
censor any news stories critical of him
Absolutely.
by installing political henchmen in private broadcast rooms. Americans know
Absolutely.
that academic freedom
But you
is in
can't
danger
dismiss
when the administration
like
cancels and withholds
serious
billions of
concerns
dollars
with the
in
OSA and
scientific
DSA
medical
here.
research funding from American universities, even for urgent life-saving studies about breast cancer or heart attacks, as a way to force schools to impose government orthodoxy on curriculum, hiring, admissions,
Truth, I
and
would
any
not like
student and
this.
faculty speech that MAGA considers politically incorrect. Americans see Trump
Truth out would be
trying to
very upset
harass,
about being
intimidate,
manipulated this way.
control,
I know
and
for a fact
shut
that they
down
would.
the press, like ABC, CBS, NBC, NPR, and PBS. The Republican-controlled FCC essentially blackmailed media companies Skydance and Paramount into agreeing
Sure.
to install a spy,
Sure,
a monitor,
that's true.
a minder, I
Like,
think
that
the Brits
stuff's
might say,
absolutely true.
to police CBS News programs to make sure that they are being sufficiently Trumpy in giving us the news in order to get approval of a merger from FCC. Meanwhile,
Sure.
Trump sued 60 Minutes and CBS personally for $20 billion for the
just-
frivolous cause of action that he thought an interview with Kamala Harris was edited too favorably.
All this
And
can be
that-
true, and it can still suck shit what our allies are doing right now, okay? Raskin saying that it's an all or nothing thing is fundamentally going to be another nail in the coffin of Democrats not understanding what their own voter base wants.
Agree to a government spy stationed in their office. Free speech is so much in danger in the U.S. today that if the government tries to violate our rights, we might not even be able to find a lawyer to defend ourselves because Trump is systematically exacting retribution.
Then why did your own
against
fucking party vote for SB 20 in Texas, Raskin? This is ridiculous. It goes both ways.
Look, our country loves free speech. We fight for free speech. We fought for free speech, and we know it's in danger when students who are lawfully in
Your
the
own
United States
goddamn
are
party
taken
doing
off the
this
street
too.
and arrested without warrants by masked federal agents in unmarked cars for writing an article or attending a rally that Stephen Miller doesn't like. Free speech is in danger when visitors to our country have their social media accounts screened at the border for any criticism
Sure.
of Donald Trump.
Absolutely.
Free speech is in danger when To Kill a Mockingbird, The Handmaid's Tale, 1984, and The Kite Runner are banned from our schools and libraries across the country, and even families
Sure,
defending
absolutely,
our freedom
yeah.
abroad have
No
to
doubt.
fight for their kids' right to read freely in public schools run by the Department of Defense.
But you
Freedom's in
can't
danger when the
say
administration
that the UK also isn't engaging in despicable behavior. You cannot say UK is not it. It's actually just the GOP, and that's it. Because that is ridiculously out of touch. The OSA has significant international
doing
impact.
their jobs, like prosecuting violent criminals and insurrectionists who try to overthrow our government and attack our
How
police
dare you
officers.
talk about this free speech shit when you're sitting here carrying water from one of the worst offenses of free speech in the international world right now? You piece of fucking shit. Democrats don't give a fuck about you.
Be the
And this is
political
the
hacks
proof.
Trump demands that they be. When private comments made by federal employees are scrutinized for anti-Trump bias and they can lose their jobs because of it, then we've entered the realm not just
Sure.
of Vladimir Putin, but of Joseph
Yeah.
Stalin.
Both sides,
Mr.
of
Trump
both
and Mr.
American
Farage
parties
both
do this
claim
shit.
They're protectors of free speech, but they only
No
want
doubt.
to protect speech they agree with. In the UK, Mr. Farage is openly promoting
Mr.
the abolition of the
Farage.
Human Rights Act, of 1998 to be replaced with a British Bill of Rights that limits the right of free speech to British citizens and legally sanctioned residents. He complains that racist threats against immigrants are not protected free speech, while he proposes to strip migrants, tourists, and perhaps even visiting American congresspeople of any free speech rights at all. I had my own close encounter with that when Mr. Farage and his team presented for more than an hour in a conversation we had about free speech. And after 3 minutes of talking, he cut me off and terminated the meeting because he didn't like what I was saying. That's the kind of free speech he's committed to. There is a free speech crisis in America today, but there's no free speech crisis in Britain.
No,
UK
there
Prime
is!
Minister Keir Starmer
There
has
is!
not shut down GB News, where Mr. Farage has his
Are
own
you
show,
a
just
fucking
because Mr. Farage has
moron?
used his airtime to call for banning.
Turn
peaceful
off the
protests.
blinders. This is a
Please
major
disagrees.
fucking
I want to stop
problem.
him from going on Russian TV 17 times and saying also and repeating that the one
These
world political
dumb
leader
fucking
he most
Democrats.
admired was Vladimir Putin, even though Vladimir
This is our
Putin a
best.
war
We're
criminal
fucked.
and a dictator who has regularly interfered in other countries' democratic elections. No one has stopped Mr. Farage from parroting Putin's absurd talking points, like when Farage claimed that NATO, the US, and Britain provoked this war in Ukraine. For a man who fashions himself as some kind of a free speech martyr, Mr. Farage seems most at home with the autocrats and dictators of the world who are crushing freedom on earth.
Please stop peeking the
Mr.
mic.
Farage wants to get rid of the Online Safety Act in his country, a law shepherded by the Conservative Party and implemented by the Labor Party, which bans child pornography online, protects children from harmful content, forbids non-consensual pornography and other unlawful content. He should go and advance the positions he's taking here in Congress today in Parliament, which is meeting today, if he's serious about it. To the people of UK who think this Putin-loving free speech imposter and Trump sycophant will protect freedom in your country, come on over to America and see what Trump and MAGA are doing to destroy our freedom, kidnap.
Thank you for the sub, girl. I appreciate it. Thank you
College
for the
students
gift.
off the street, ban books from our libraries, militarize our police.
He's not wrong about Trump censorship. This is a situation where the GOP loves censorship but only gets upset when they get censored. That's absolutely true. But you can't sit here and tell me the OSA is not one of the biggest free speech violations that exist in the Western world right now. This is a fundamentally existential threat to the free and open internet. This man is a piece of shit for even suggesting that the OSA is a non-issue. That is someone who does not care about you and definitely does not care about the most marginalized among us. Palestinian activists, queer folks, creating queer adult content or art, and sex workers. That's a guy who's a piece of fucking shit.
Well, let's say that's not how I think it actually goes. So we now will introduce today's witnesses.
Twink twice.
We will start with
Hi,
the Right
Smug
Honourable Nigel Farage. Mr. Farage is a member of Parliament from Clacton and the leader of the Reform UK Party. He is also a television host and was a leading proponent of the Brexit campaign. Mr. Lorcan Price is an attorney with the ADF International, a non-profit organization that works to protect religious freedom, free speech, parental rights.
It really is a situation where two people who do benefit from having some level of censorious control are fighting with each other, trying to claim not it, and point the finger at the other one. Both of these people love censorship when it benefits them, and they hate censorship when it doesn't benefit them. But what Raskin is doing, what Raskin just did, is particularly deplorable because it shows that he cares more about maintaining the idea of maintaining a lie than a truthful reality. And I can never, ever support that.
We welcome our witnesses and thank them for appearing today. We'll begin by swearing you in. Would you all please rise and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Let the record show that each of the witnesses answered in the affirmative. You can, thank you, please be seated. Please know that your written testimony will be entered into the record in its entirety. Accordingly, we ask that you summarize your testimony.
Farage has been very anti-OSA.
I think we'll just go down the line, and we will start with Mr. Reed, then Mr. Price, Mr. Farage, and then Professor K. So,
Professor
Mr.
K.
Reed, you're recognized. 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
My name is Morgan Reed, and I'm the president of ACT, the App Association. Our members are small and medium-sized tech companies from your districts and around the world. We build and sell the apps and the products you love. If you're scheduling a haircut, tracking your productivity at work, or using online tools to
Yeah,
train
Farage
your
is a little
employees,
ahead in the polls right
it's
now.
likely one of my members
Reform, rather.
made that happen. I'm here to tell you that our European members are just as good, just as smart, and just as entrepreneurial as our American
One thing to know
Whether
is
it's
that
Corinne Sauvage in France, Mitchell
Reform
Volker in the
is
Netherlands,
taking
or
these
Rob
policies around anti-OSA because they're a populist party and they know that Labor and Conservative doesn't give a fuck about OSA criticism. This is an easy W in Farage's corner.
and compliance requirements from an EU government that is constantly asking how government can be more
I actually
involved.
I disagree more. I think actually he will because OSA harms conservative speech significantly. Not so much harms it as censors it, like limits it, because so much conservative speech goes into batshit crazy territory too.
In red tape. Small companies find value in the bigger platforms for 3 boring and absolutely vital reasons. They need to offload overhead, have access to a global market, and have customer trust. Because small businesses are always overworked and undermanned. For us, offloading overhead is critical. A small business is trying to ship a product, not learn about tax laws in 160 countries. We don't want to sign multiple contracts with middlemen to handle shipping or web storage or send bills to dozens of different platforms, each with their own PO system. Small businesses need to focus their time on serving the customer to compete. And of course, to grow
Yeah.
your small business, you need customers.
Yeah, you do.
And that means access
so
to a
true.
global market. If your product has fewer than 100 customers in your state, that's a hobby. But 100,000 customers worldwide, that's a business.
A business.
Nearly every one of the DMA's designated gatekeepers are
Just
actually
testing audio really
gateways
quickly here.
to
Okay,
a
good.
global market. But you might say, Morgan, the internet itself is a global market. And we would agree, but the internet lacks one key characteristic: trust. Today, many of us take for granted the measures of keeping malware and
To your point,
other
Kirk,
content
this
off
is
our devices
really
and
difficult
off
because
of our shopping
it is
sites.
a case where the only
DMA
advocates in the
threatens to
room,
change this by
like
forcing
what's happening with
companies to
right-wing
block the red
YouTubing,
market for
YouTubers covering adult
As a
game
result,
censorship,
consumers will
the left has
rationally steer
abdicated
away
this
from
issue
startups
with those that
and small
have
developers
political
they've never heard of,
standing, right?
towards larger,
Save
more
for
established
key
rivals
content
that
creators
spend
and
millions on
consumers. Like
marketing
Hassan has
by
traditionally
Super Bowl
talked about
ads to build
this
brand.
issue, for
Don't forget
example.
who's
But
pushing
a
the
lot of
brand.
other folks have,
Companies like
and also Taylor
Spotify,
Lorenz
Yelp,
as well as a
DuckDuckGo.
journalist. But a lot of politicians are abdicating responsibility or trying to side with more censorious policies because they see censoring a lot of other people but also getting conservatives censored is a benefit overall.
It can now be sideloaded and
Thank
could
you for
even
the follow,
operate
Henry.
without parental controls. This is the most damaging aspect of the DMA. By forcing the gatekeepers to remove features or capabilities that would keep bad actors off your smartphone and out of your wallet, the DMA demands the world adopt a flea market model, where anybody with a plastic folding table and some boxes that fell off the back of the truck are given the same access to consumers as legitimate businesses. For small businesses, we want the platforms to provide us with ever-improving tools, features, and pricing models to make it attractive. We don't love the big platforms, we do business with them. Because without our products, their platforms aren't worth very much. Without their tools, our overhead goes up, our speed goes
The
down.
criticism of sideloading is a really good example of how there are no good people in the room on this one.
More, not less. We want them to do more to reduce overhead, more to protect our intellectual property, and do more to maintain those trust relationships. And into this relatively straightforward business arrangement, Europe has injected regulatory walls like the Digital Markets Act, the Digital Services Act, the Online Safety Act, our old friend GDPR, and the newest edition, the AI Act. These laws aren't there to lower friction. They are, as Teresa Ribera at the European Commission puts it, focused on creating a
Next.
culture of compliance. That's a quote.
Is this going to go up later? Yes.
While an
Probably the whole VOD.
ever-thickening wall of overlapping regulations is exactly what compliance lawyers want, it's not what innovators want. It's not what small businesses want, and it's not what customers want. We ask you to reject the European regulatory culture and instead focus on a culture of opportunity and innovation. Small businesses never succeed if we can't beat the red tape. Thank you very much for your time. And I look forward
Of
to
course, someone like this would happily sit down and shut down sideloading. Mr. Price.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Raskin, distinguished members of the committee, ladies and gentlemen.
But what about
My
me,
name is
huh?
Norton Price. I am a barrister and legal counsel for
Barrister.
ADF International. And I'm very happy to come here today to speak to you about the perilous situation for freedom of expression in Europe and why it matters for Americans. I do this on the basis of my experience litigating in speech and religious liberty cases before the European Court of Human Rights. However, today, principally, I wish to address the Digital Services Act of the European Union. But before I do that, I'd like to set the scene briefly by telling you how bad things have become in Europe and the United Kingdom.
Go for it.
And very much building on the remarks of the chairman.
Oh, my bad.
When I met some of the members of the committee in Europe recently, I think that there was a genuine element of surprise and disbelief about the state of affairs in Europe. I'll give you some examples. In Finland, our client, Päivi Räsänen, Member of Parliament, is now in year 5 of a prosecution for simply posting a verse from Scripture on Twitter.
Of course he's Irish. Good
our
morning,
client,
ladies.
Rose Doherty in Scotland, a 74-year-old grandmother, was arrested by offering to have consensual...
It's 10 in the morning.
Adam Smith Connor, an army veteran, was prosecuted for praying silently in his head in England. And just yesterday, you'll have seen that
he's Irish. My
UK
bad.
police
My
arrested
bad.
a comedian and fellow Irishman, Graham Linehan,
Fellow
who I
Irish.
know well, for tweets about
No!
gender ideology. German pensioners are having their homes raided. And
There's no good people in the room, chat.
one member of the Green Party in Germany has over 700 criminal complaints outstanding for insult. What's happening in Europe is, as Vice President Vance said on St. Valentine's Day in Munich, a serious retreat from a fundamental value, that of free speech. It's a sign that our European political elite has lost control of the narrative, and the Digital Services Act is the response to that, an increasingly desperate attempt to suppress growing public discontent.
I'm part Irish.
Why should this matter for Americans? Why should you be concerned? Because of the worldwide reach of European law, the so-called Brussels effect changes regulation in every area that the European Union chooses to regulate. And now they've entered the business of regulating speech. And they're very proud of the so-called Brussels effect when you ask them about it. This new EU law is essentially an anti-speech law. And when you read the case law of the European Court of Justice, statements from senior officials, and the provisions of the Digital Services Act, you can see everything is there to create a digital censorship industrial complex.
Just painting a very pro-corporate
anti-consumer view
of it.
Structure of trusted flaggers, codes of conduct on so-called hate speech and misinformation, content moderation for so-called systemic risks. Much of this is hidden in bland technocratic language in the DSA, and our written submissions go into some of the problems associated with it. But it constitutes nothing more than an attempt to bring Brussels regulation of speech onto a global stage. Furthermore, when the European Union is now negotiating trade deals, including with your neighbours to the north in Canada, they insist that the Digital Services Act is part of that. So it's very clearly a global intent. It means that the European Union will set the global standard when it comes to speech. And because of the laws that I just outlined in Europe, the type of prosecutions we're seeing, it's an extremely low standard. It draws, I would suggest to you, a digital curtain where once there was an iron curtain. And US companies bear the brunt disproportionately of this. They're hijacked by the DSA to become essentially the EU's global censorship police, whether they like it or not. The DSA contains expansive powers of investigation, huge compliance costs, and crippling fines if they're found to be non-compliant for removing so-called illegal content. Indeed, I commend your committee's report recently on showing the bias at the heart of the system. As we speak, companies are having to make a decision, an invidious decision between whether or not they defend German pensioners criticizing politicians or they comply with the European Commission and with national laws. We know from COVID censorship which is the most likely route they take. Compliance is easier and cheaper, but it is not good for speech.
Thank you for the follow.
Indeed, yesterday I was just informed by a senior lawyer for a major US company that the Germans are prosecuting a 14-year-old boy for a mild online post. They want the identity of another post outside Germany, and they've launched criminal proceedings against US employees of this company for refusing to pass over the identity information. That's the attitude we're dealing with. We've seen it from Thierry Breton, from others in the European Commission. They want this censorship power and they want it globally. The digital square is one of the great gifts from the United States to the world. It has been transformative for our political discussion.
It's important to note that he's kind of bypassing some of the specifics of these stories and that they do require more context to better understand, for example, if he's trying to defend maybe speech that should be curtailed because it's hate speech.
Close allies and democracies do this kind of thing, and we must call them out for it. We must take a stand against this new censorship wave. Democracy requires free speech. I'm looking forward to our discussion and any questions you may have.
I would add really quickly as well, I think this is important to stress that I know Farage is about to speak, but
Thank you very much indeed. Good morning.
I think a lot of these laws are not intended to censor American speech. It's to control speech coming into the specific countries. And there is a certain lack of understanding from a lot of politicians that by trying to censor some aspects of the internet in their own domain, they de facto impact the international stage. I think some politicians want to censor the international stage in various countries. I think other politicians just want literally just to like get the child porn out of like the internet in the UK or whatever. So there's variants of misunderstanding, and then some folks that want international influence. I think it varies from politician to politician.
To the death, your right to say something that we fundamentally...
That suit is way too blue.
It's the absolute foundation, if you think about it, of free speech, of democracy, of living in freedom. It's kind of why we fought 2 world wars at massive, massive cost.
It's
to
great
defend that very
concern,
principle
bruh.
for ourselves and for many, many others around the country. And I first became worried about all this with cancel culture. You know, the idea that we can't have this speaker go to university because some people might be offended by what he or she have to say.
He or
It is
she, there's
important
only 2. Fucking Family Guy
There's
joke over
not
here.
a parent in the United Kingdom, and I would guess it's the same for America too, that is not concerned about content their children as minors can find on the internet. Not a single parent that is not concerned about this.
Right, sure.
But at the moment, we're not finding the right solutions. I do myself begin to
Blue
think
Boy.
that hardware might be one of the solutions. That laptops, that handsets could be programmed so that many, many apps and many, many services simply
This is
aren't
what the
available
adult industry is
on these
asking for.
devices. But what we've done is to go down the legislative route. And it's extraordinary that, you know, I come from...
Naivety. I hate the fact that he's saying the stuff that the adult industry's been asking for.
It doesn't give me any great joy.
I can't believe I agree with him.
And describing the really awful authoritarian situation that we have now sunk into. J.D. Vance did us all a service at the Munich Security Conference back in February this year. He really got this debate up and running, and it's a vital one. We've run on since then. The Online Safety Act was put in place by the last Conservative government. I don't doubt for a minute they're good intentions, but sometimes the road to hell is paved with those good intentions. And we are now where we are. We have a couple of very
He's so
famous
British,
cases.
yeah.
We, of course, have
He looks
Lucy
British.
Connolly, who put out an intemperate tweet after the savage murder of those 3 beautiful young girls, she herself, a mother who had lost a child.
Okay, now
it
we
was
can be British.
intemperate, it was wrong, but she removed it 3.5 hours later, sentenced to 31 months in prison. She's now out, having served 40% of the time.
In the can.
I wanted to bring her with me today as living proof of what can go wrong. Sadly, the restrictions that have been put on her banned her from making the trip.
How much
which
more
is a very,
betrayal
very
can I
great shame.
take?
And we, of course, have the extraordinary events that we understood yesterday of Graham Linehan, the comedy writer,
British.
comedic writer.
No.
And he put out some tweets months ago when he was in Arizona. And months later, he arrives at Heathrow Airport to be met by 5 armed police. Armed police, not a big deal in the USA, a very big deal in the United Kingdom. 5 of them.
5 of them.
And he was arrested and taken away for questioning. He's not even a British citizen.
He's not even British.
He's an Irish citizen.
He's Irish.
This could happen to any American man or woman that goes to Heathrow
There's only
and
2.
has said things online that the British government and British police don't like. It is a potentially big threat to tech bosses, to many, many others. This legislation we've got will damage trade between our countries, threaten free speech across the West because of the knock-on rollout effects of this legislation from us or from the European Union. So I've come today as well to be
I've come
klaxon,
today.
to say
Me
to
would
you,
have come today.
don't allow, piece by piece, this to happen here in America.
See, this is the problem, is that, for instance, at the start,
And yourselves,
we have a really good point about think of the children being used to commit censorship. We have Farage coming in and advocating for the exact thing that Free Speech Coalition, the adult advocacy group, and many other groups that do want to protect children from accessing content they shouldn't have argued. Make it a hardware measure. Do not make it a legislative measure. Make it a hardware measure. They are saying some things that have value And then they say the conservative talking points, the right-wing talking points.
Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Raskin, members of the committee, thank you for the invitation to appear before you. I ask that my written statement be entered into the record. My name is David Kay. I'm a law professor at the University of California, Irvine, where I research and teach in international law. I know something about censorship. From 2014 to 2020, I was the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Opinion and Expression. In that role, I monitored a growing global assault on free speech. Among other things, I led a landmark effort to call out China's attacks on civil society. I detailed repression of media and criticism in Putin's Russia. I condemned Iran's suppression of dissent. And I even criticized democratic governments when they sought to force platforms to take down lawful speech. That is censorship. Violations of the human right to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas of all kinds, guaranteed by Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, a treaty ratified by the United States in 1992. Inspired by the First Amendment, it guarantees a speaker's rights and the rights of everyone to access information. So it pains me that the United States, the country that had my back as Special Rapporteur, the land of the First Amendment's make no law, now leads the charge to undermine freedom of speech and of the press. The threat is real, live, and I think shocking given our nation's historic commitments. The administration follows a well-worn path. A few examples. The silencing of scientists and public health officials. Just last week, the head of the CDC was fired because she would not agree to change her conclusions about vaccines. The administration has scrubbed websites that doctors and parents use to make decisions.
Finally,
censoring
some
and
sense.
punishing speech of visitors.
I'm nervous, though.
In visa interviews and at the border, there are increasing reports of officers screening visitors according to their social media activity or detaining and deporting based on speech and op-eds. And the repeated assaults on the media, as we've seen attacks on public broadcasting,
We're the land of the
frivolous
Whopper.
lawsuits against media outlets, and the decimation of Voice of America. This is the
It's like
tip
that Family
of an
Guy joke.
iceberg
The land of the free and the
censorship
home of
that
the
concern this
the
committee
Whopper.
and every American. Yet U.S. officials who claim to be free speech warriors are spending their time looking abroad. Now, I know of nobody who argues that EU and British laws on speech are perfect. Still, the EU Digital Services Act and the UK Online Safety Act respond to problems both sides of the aisle in Congress have found serious but have yet to address. The enormous, opaque, and unaccountable power of a small number of massive tech companies over our information environments. The EU answered the question of massive platform power, not by claiming new powers to take down content or accounts. It adopted new rules to empower users, including by requiring notice and an opportunity to appeal content moderation decisions. The Online Safety Act, championed by Labor and Conservative parties, was widely popular as an attempt to hold big tech accountable.
It's not popular.
It does have elements that concern me.
Okay.
Yet whatever faults it might have, it, like any other British law, is subject to legal challenge and review by courts for any violation of fundamental rights, just as we would expect of any democracy. Neither established censorship regimes.
Finally,
I encourage
at
members
least
of this
that
committee to
OSA
consider
is not
two
perfect.
First, instead of criticizing allied democracies, consider the kinds of content online that you find objectionable. Maybe it's anti-Semitic or Islamophobic content, misogyny, child endangerment, content glorifying terrorism or
This is
inciting
like
violence.
the Captain Plan of awful
How do you
things on the internet.
propose to address those in a way that is consistent with free speech values?
Okay, good question.
That's not an easy question.
It is a good
and
question,
it
at
can't be
least he's
waved
asking
away
it,
with
though.
just 3 words because free speech.
That's true.
The EU and the UK have made their choices subject to democratic judicial oversight.
Okay.
And acting in good faith, I think this committee could do the same.
Okay.
Second, this committee has the obligation To protect
That's a pretty
American
milquetoast answer, but it's crazy that's the most reasonable approach on this we're going to see from this
I
yet.
think oversight and constraint from this committee would make quite a bit of sense. That, I would respectfully submit, is the real threat to American speech and innovation, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. The chair,
This is gonna
now
be a-
proceeding to the
a
5-minute rule. The
panel.
chair now recognizes the chairman of the subcommittee, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chairman Jordan. Well, one of the things we found out on our trip through Europe was that the U.S. innovates,
I get what you mean,
China
Homer, yeah.
duplicates, and now the EU regulates. Mr. Reid, I have a question for you first. Reports estimate that complying with the EU's Digital Marketing
I love
Act,
the windows
DMA,
in the
can cost
background.
American companies up to $1 billion
They're
every
going to
single year.
Diet Coke.
That's
So American.
not just a number on a page. Those costs
Quintessential-
ultimately fall on
Quintessential burger politician, by the way. Diet Coke, raspy voice.
higher prices.
Hair is absolutely out of there. He's so burger.
Competing against subsidized foreign rivals. Mr.
White.
Reid, is it correct
White.
that these compliance
white.
costs affect our economy?
Mr.
And what does it mean for America if Europe is allowed to impose these
Okay.
kind of costs on U.S. innovation?
Oh, good, Pat. Great to have you.
The short answer is yes,
Lol, my God.
absolutely.
That's
The more
Peepaw.
detailed answer is that unfortunately that Europe has taken an
Peepaw's a
ex-ante
fighter.
approach to regulation. The United States has always done well
Yeah, right.
with an
Very
ex
John Cody,
post.
good to have you, by the way.
As a small business entrepreneur, I actually want fraud to be gone after. I want deceptive practices to be reduced. But unfortunately, what we see in the EU is an ex-ante process that ups my compliance requirements without actually giving customers the certainty of the result. So it's absolutely raising costs. And for American developers, we see one of the largest problems is how do you get to those European customers if the first tranche you hit is paying a compliance lawyer to meet all of these tests?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
That's not
Mr.
wrong.
Price, our Federal Trade Commission Chairman Ferguson has warned the government regulation can stifle, obviously, competition and innovation, and in many cases, the government itself becomes the most dangerous of all the monopolies. Isn't it the DMA? Is the DMA a perfect example of that? It kind of weaponizes and makes it burdensome with
People off his diet
regulations.
soda. And
Can you give me your
cigs and
comments
chunky
on the
heat.
DMA and
He's so
what do you think the
burger.
status
He's
is
such
right
a
now?
burger guy. Like burger
Certainly
politician.
agree that European regulation generally slows down competition. It creates a situation whereby companies are unable to innovate with any degree of speed because they're constantly looking over their shoulder towards regulators around compliance. DMA, a very good example of that. Not just the DMA, though. Of course, you have the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR.
I guess some of them.
You have the DSA, the Digital Services Act, and constantly more and more being added. It's been estimated
enough.
on
Anyone in their 30s.
in the digital market space alone, since 2016, 30 pages of regulation existed at the time. We're now over 1,000 and growing. So the European Union's response to American innovation is more and more regulation, generally around nebulous concepts like safetyism and protecting consumers, but very often just, particularly with the DSA, to create, unfortunately, a censorship industrial complex, as I outlined. DMA, very good example of that as well.
Thank you very much. Mr. Reid, if I could come back to you, President Trump just secured a landmark commitment
Mr.
from the
Price
EU
partner,
to
Mr.
address
Reid.
unjustified
Safetyism.
digital trade barriers. It was
I
part
don't
of the,
disagree with him there entirely.
US-EU trade deal.
I think he's kind of right.
I'm hopeful that this will result in the EU kind of removing, and a lot of people we talked to in Europe when we were there said that there was a possibility that they could pull back on some of this. What action could President Trump take to hold the EU accountable to their commitment? And are there additional enforcement tools that Congress could provide to make that happen?
Could provide.
Well, I think Congressman Fitzgerald, you've done great work in reaching out and sending letters to make it clear what the position of the United States government is on these issues. The reality is that the Europeans themselves, through the Draghi report, are recognizing that they have done a lot to harm those very same industries. We're hopeful that the United States can continue to use the careful power and the careful discussions through our trade negotiations and other actions to
I agree, Homer.
get them to step back.
I agree.
But we're here to talk about free speech, and so one of the things I would point out is we want the small businesses in Europe to also be able to speak and say, hey, we need these regulations pulled back.
Right.
So just to follow up to that then as well, a 2024 staff report by the Housing Oversight Committee found that FTC Chair Lena Khan was using taxpayer dollars to send agency quote-unquote liaisons to the EU to assist with the implementation of the Digital Markets Act. Mr. Reed, do you think it's appropriate for that type of consultation or for the use of taxpayer dollars to help a foreign country implement laws?
This is what I'm talking about, guys. Remember yesterday I talked about the idea that it's not collective shout. Well, let me
fairly
answer.
discriminate against United States companies. We're hopeful that U.S. taxpayer dollars can be used to ensure open markets around the world and a safe environment for our entrepreneurs to succeed.
Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Okay, so obviously that's like kind of a swipe at the Biden administration, right? But remember what I talked about, guys? It's not that collective shout is like laundering their politics into America so much as it is that America is kind of low-key putting in some of these policies in other countries. Like having the liaison go over to Europe to make this censorious stuff. It's laundering plans for censorship through other countries.
Amendment rights of Americans resides in the White House. Our Republican colleagues have brought us here today to talk about Europe. They've invited a fringe politician from the United Kingdom to attack the laws regulating certain conduct online in his country and the European Union.
I think it's a good point that, you know, hey, like Americans are trying to get these policies pushed in Europe.
Foreign actors, hate speech, and other fraudulent or criminal conduct. They have sounded the alarms about these foreign laws, but when it comes to the Trump administration's suppression of speech in this country, Republicans are curiously and dangerously silent.
All right.
There is virtually no corner of society that Donald Trump and his administration have left untouched by their effort to impose their radical views on the American people and to stamp out dissent. Since taking office, President Trump and members of his administration have used the powers of the executive branch in an attempt to silence their political opponents by attacking our core democratic institutions, such as academia, the legal profession, and journalism. These are moves straight out of the authoritarian playbook. For example, the Trump administration has taken aim at colleges and universities, trying to bend them to its will by withholding billions of dollars in...
Yeah, like no doubt in my mind the Trump administration wants to get like the censorious state ID stuff in certain areas of the world too.
And in some cases,
like de facto. Russ Fault probably loves OSA.
Has demanded onerous conditions that infringe on academic freedom. On these same college campuses, students are being kidnapped for writing op-eds, and others are being deported for participating in protests. The Trump administration has also targeted disfavored law firms that dare to challenge the president or to hold him accountable, or simply for hiring an attorney who clashed with Trump in the past. Some have sadly capitulated to its campaign of extortion. The president has even taken aim at the arts and humanities, launching a hostile takeover of the Kennedy Center and censoring exhibits at the Smithsonian Institution, attempting to whitewash American history and to stamp out free expression. He has also engaged in a dangerous campaign of harassment and intimidation of the media. For example,
the thing is, Nadler's correct. Like, this is a big fucking problem. The problem is, Democrats will not take this over the line and bring it into the red zone and say, hey, also, by the way, the OSA sucks. If the Democrats say that, they've got such a winning populist support. But they're never going to say it because it looks like they're kind of throwing the EU to the dogs and they're trying to like isolate Trump essentially and say like the rest of the world's fine, Trump is just weird. And it's like, no, like the censorship is like an issue also among our allies as well. It needs to be dealt with.
The merger. What a coincidence. This followed ABC's settlement of a similarly baseless Trump lawsuit for $15 million because of corporate pressure. And now the Wall Street Journal and Rupert Murdoch face their own $10 billion lawsuit from Donald Trump over the Journal's reporting that shed new light on Trump's well-documented relationship with
like Nadler's not wrong about like Trump administration censorship being on crazy-ass levels.
Media companies or newspapers or television stations.
But he will never ever say the OSA should butt out of America as the problem.
The free press is essential to our democracy and the rule of law. Can you explain how President Trump's attacks on the news media and his attempts to sue them into silence impact freedom of expression and freedom of speech in this country?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Nadler, and congratulations on your announcement this week. Well, I think it's important to note that when we're talking about attacks on the press, it's not just about attacks on the journalists themselves or the media outlets themselves. It's about every American's right of access to information. It's about the freedom of public debate that we get from a media that isn't intimidated either by suit or by criticism from the Oval Office or whatever it might be. And so I think it's really important to think about these kinds of attacks not only as those on journalists, but on the entire
Judiciary Committee?
information.
Oh, so you mean like where Professor K's
ecosystem.
from?
And I think it's also important for us to realize that we can't pick and choose what censorship we like and don't like. I think the chairman's statement was really correct when he said censorship used by people in power to censor critics, that's at the core. And we should be examining where do we see that. We tend to see that quite a bit in this country, I think in an unprecedented way.
In your testimony, you identified a number of threats to freedom of expression in the United States, including science and public health. It's also been reported that the government has a list of hundreds
They
of
didn't
words
even put
ranging
Professor
from
K on
issues
the
related to
witnesses
climate change
list.
to diversity, equity, and inclusion that it essentially is banned from government websites and uses to make funding decisions. Is this true?
I've seen those reports, and I understand that to be true as well, particularly the use of lists of words, essentially to censor research that would be conducted by scientists at universities and at national academies in the United States.
Thank you. My time has expired. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.
Oops,
Recognized for
my bad.
unanimous consent. Understand?
Yes.
Gentleman's
Thank you, Mr.
recognized.
Chairman. This is a minority fact sheet about the majority's report on the Digital Services Act.
Well, we'll look forward to reading that. Without objection.
Mr. Chairman, I have another.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for unanimous consent.
Thanks for the
Chairman, I
fine.
have a
Howard.
unanimous
He's from
consent
UC
request.
Irving.
I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an article published by Reuters on October 29th, 2024, titled Fact Check, UK Woman Jailed for Inciting Racial Hatred, Not Posting Hurtful Words, which confirms that Lucy Connolly pled guilty to inciting racial hatred and was not, as claimed in deceptive social media posts, punished merely for posting, quote, edgy words on the internet.
Yeah.
Without objection. I'm sure we'll
Thank
be
you, Mr.
some
Chairman.
comments about that later. And the gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What Naller is saying is important here in the sense that it's important to remember these guys in the panel, not Professor K, but Faraj and Price. They might say things that are not the full truth in order to look better.
$87 million. Isn't that correct?
This guy looks like he's from California.
I'm not familiar with that.
Well, I didn't think you would be, but neither was the ranking member, apparently. MP Faraj, do you have the equivalent of what the Professor K was talking about, which is the Article 19? You're a signatory to that international convention, if you will, on free speech. Do you feel that it is being observed in the UK?
They're not truth. They're look better.
Maybe a signatory to
Bye,
it,
Homer.
and we may. And the Prime Minister, today in the House of Commons was talking about free speech, and indeed when President Trump was with him in Scotland the other day, he talked about our proud history of free speech, but what people say and what they do are two very different things. And the argument is that the Online Safety Act, I'll repeat what I said earlier, may have been designed by the Tories with the best of intentions, but has turned out to be the sledgehammer that misses the nut. It's not protecting kids, and it is damaging.
So now,
That is true.
going back to the United States, you don't have a constitutional framework that is the equivalent of ours in that you have no First Amendment absolute guarantee. Is that correct?
It is correct. Our Constitution isn't in written form. It's based on common law that's evolved and adapted over centuries, and your founding fathers looked at the best bits that we had.
So it appears in Europe and in the UK,
Burger
free
wing.
speech is whatever the bloody members think it is at a given time, and it changes with the will of the people they elect. Is that right?
Yes, but I don't think at any point we've really had a proper debate about infringement of free speech until COVID. And I think COVID changed the game.
Really hard.
Okay.
I think the government, social media
in a
platforms,
weird way.
big media, suddenly there were arguments that needed to be made that were banned.
So, Mr. Reed,
Okay.
to your knowledge, and
The California rep said
Professor
bloody for no
should be
reason.
ill-informed even on our own governor's lawsuits. First Amendment. In the United States, you can sue for anything. Do you often win if you sue against
Bro was trying
institutions like Fox, Wall Street Journal?
I could see him fail the
Isn't it
speak
true that
check, the
effectively
charisma check.
The First Amendment creates a tremendous shield against anything except malicious, deliberate lies?
Remember your founding father did I said he's
Not my
allergic to
area of
blood.
expertise. We can absolutely talk about apps, but as an American, yes, that is absolutely my understanding.
And
You wanna
have
go to
no
order, we
such
can absolutely talk
protection,
about apps.
Just the opposite. You have no idea in Europe or in Britain about what is going to be allowed or not allowed. In other words, you don't know where to call balls and strikes. You just simply have to pay the fines when you get to them.
Well, I only carry one passport, so I'm more aware of the American laws, but that is my understanding correct.
Okay, now, we
Okay.
do have a First Amendment, and we are a signatory to Article 19. So I'm going to go a little bit into opinion. Now, I'm the author of No Censorship on Our Shores, meaning,
Whoa, humble
Mr.
brag.
Price, I know you're familiar with it. I'm not going to tolerate censorship overseas and then have those people come to the United States. Now, Professor K may object to the idea that I'm not going to let people who have been involved in censorship come into the United States because I think it's unacceptable to get away with that overseas. But let's be reciprocal for a moment for Mr. Reed and for everyone. If we're seeing Europe and the UK and other countries stifle what we are guaranteed in the U.S., and particularly arrest somebody for what they said while on U.S. soils, shouldn't this administration be just as strong and that we will not tolerate that activity even off our shores? And isn't that ultimately what the United States must make available to the world, essentially guarantee the First Amendment to anyone, anywhere, if they want to do business with the United States? Mr. Price.
So much talk about
leadership of the
common
United
nut.
States on this issue has been transformative for the discussion in Europe. And from the President, Secretary Rubio, and the Vice President, they have transformed the issue, and I hope more comes.
So, to the fringe parliamentarian, as you were called, and probably the future Prime Minister, what say you?
Yes, for Mr. Nadler's benefit, it's a very big fringe, and we're doing rather well, but there we are. Look, you know, if you were to follow, Mr. Isaac, the logic of your argument, that you were to ban people from entering America who would pass legislation that was prejudicial against American companies or American citizens and would threaten them with potential arrest if they came across the other side of the pond. I think the practical difficulty with that is you'd have to ban the British government, the entire Labour Party. So I'm not sure in practical terms.
The kid over
that it
here,
works, but
like
I
crazy
understand the
smiling, is
sentiment.
so funny.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields
Bonneville,
back. The
Nesbitt,
gentlelady from
Sheffield.
California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're like
Let me be
congressional.
clear. I am not here to defend the European laws, and I've often criticized the approach of European countries to internet-related issues. It's really generally wrong-headed. But I don't really think that's the point of this hearing. I think the real threat to the First Amendment isn't coming from Europe. It's coming from Republican-led states that have introduced bills to close the open internet, and most of all, from Donald Trump, who's actively trampling free speech here at home. I think it's rather absurd for this committee to spend
I don't think it's so much
our time
undemocratic.
criticizing laws we have no jurisdiction over, while ignoring the countless ways the Trump administration is tearing up the First Amendment. If this committee is really serious about protecting free speech, we need to focus on the Trump administration's literal assault on the First Amendment that's happening right here at home. So,
I know,
Professor
it's
Kay,
so funny.
I have a series of questions for you. Do you think that arresting international students for being critical of U.S. foreign policy is an attack on the First Amendment?
Yes, absolutely.
And isn't that because it's not just the right of the person to speak, but the right
You
of
aren't
all the rest
focusing
of
on
us
it?
to hear? The First Amendment isn't just about the speaker, it's also about the listener. Isn't that
This
correct?
shot's really
That's
bad
true.
here.
Now, a federal judge agreed with you and with us, warning that arresting students for their views chills the speech of millions of Americans. The government can't punish speech
Welcome back, Homer.
simply because they don't like its content. This year, as has been mentioned by others, President Trump's FCC blocked
We
the
don't know
CBS
because
merger
this is-
until the network agreed
the
to change its
nameplate's blocked.
programming.
Why was
and
Anna
install a so-called bias
crashing?
monitor.
Oh, no.
Monitor. The head of 60 Minutes resigned,
She gives
saying
me
he could no
librarian
longer
vibes,
make
yeah.
independent decisions about the news.
Okay, that's
Doesn't
enough
that
for me to
sound
get
like a
her name.
violation of the First Amendment's guarantee of a free press?
It does, and I think it's important to underline that restrictions on free speech don't come just from a law or the police outside
So
your
Lofgren.
door. It can come from a whole network of intimidation, of
Also
public
from
attack
California.
that really does
Democrat.
chill speech, including the kinds of attacks that lead to deportations.
Safe haven
of
processes, dog.
people
They're not
who
gonna
are
talk
here
about 'em, sadly.
Just to study.
Since January, the Trump administration has revoked over 6,000 student visas because the speech of these students didn't align with what Trump agreed with. And now they're doing the same to immigrants who are applying for citizenship.
This is all high level.
Does that
She mentioned red
raise
state
First
censorship
Amendment
laws.
concerns, do you think?
Yeah.
I think it raises First Amendment concerns, but it's also in a broader way, it's raising concerns about our tolerance of dissent of this government's.
A lot of this is going to be posturing to try to prove that another
And
political
Not everything is specifically about the First
party
Amendment
is
and the
irresponsible
ability to enforce
for
it in the
the
courts.
most grievous
Sometimes
crimes
it's
of online
about
censorship.
leading
So we're not going to
people
see as much discussion about payment processors, SB20, things like that, because those things are not easy Ws. It's very easy to say, like, Trump bad because CBS, and it's very hard to say, like, maybe both of our parties are responsible for some egregious civil liberties issues going on in Texas.
How our leaders behave towards that kind of open debate.
The Federal Trade Commission held up a merger of two major advertising firms, Omnicom and Interpublic, until they agreed to run ads on X, essentially a government-ordered gift to Elon Musk. Isn't that a blatant violation of free speech standards, forcing private companies to promote speech they otherwise wouldn't?
It's certainly a kind of extensive use of the term of jawboning that has come up over the last several years. And it's a kind of pressure that absolutely interferes with free speech.
Boner
and it's
mentioned.
also the kind of weaponizing of
A third
our
additional
federal
party.
agencies in support of a particular actor, a particular business person.
It seems to me that these actions affect not just the companies or the individuals that are the target of this abuse, but they're
I want
also
someone to give me a
to
job to my bone.
to scare off
boner.
everyone else from engaging in that behavior. Would
No
you agree
boners.
with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what we're seeing right now with just this essentially a kind of avalanche of restrictions and intimidations of free speech in this country, that it's designed to chill that kind of debate. It's designed to chill whistleblowers, to chill
Sure.
scientists,
Yeah, no doubt.
to chill professors and students. I think that's essentially what we're witnessing right now.
No, I agree
My
with him.
time has expired, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Generally yields back.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent.
You see request from the gentleman, California.
Yes, I ask unanimous consent that the Politico ad or news that was dated June 27, 2025, saying Gavin Newsom sues for $787 million be placed in the record.
Without objection. Mr. Price, has anything in the Digital Services Act changed in the last year?
Why does this guy look like a clean-up Asmongold?
No, sir.
Hasn't been amended, hasn't been changed at all?
No, sir.
So everything Mr. Breton wrote 1 year ago today, well, August 12,
It
2024,
does sound rattly.
that's still in place, where he said to an American
House
running an American
judiciary.
company about an
No.
interview that was yet to happen, future interview, threatened this individual. None of that nothing in the law has changed that would change what actions this individual took.
Nothing in the law.
Just because Mr. Breton's gone doesn't mean Ms. Verkunen can't do the same darn thing, right?
Precisely.
Yeah, and that's the concern. Mr. Price, is this statement, we need to take back our country, is that statement hate speech?
We don't really know what hate speech is. It's so vague, and that's the problem with it. I wouldn't regard that as hate speech.
Well, you may not, but the EU regulators do, because they had a workshop on May 25th where, this is part of our investigation, material we'd subpoenaed, they gave us this information, and they said it is hate speech. That's a concern, right?
Yes, sir.
And it could be made by an American and be termed hate speech, and there could be some ramifications for Americans' First Amendment liberties. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Price, what's a trusted flagger?
A trusted flagger is an NGO or a private organization that's recognized under the DSA, and if they identify or a complaint has been made...
Wait. Recognized by who?
the terms of the DSA. Oh, and the national regulators and the commission as well.
Okay, and they do what? So they're recognized by the government. They're approved by the government.
Yes,
all right? And what do they do?
I will say really quickly, it is an interesting point to make that if someone says something like, we need to take back our country, and they get censored because of European law, but technically they might have a right to engage in that sort of speech in America. It does pose an interesting question of what is and isn't hate speech. Historically, as a lot of folks in Europe know here, America has taken pretty significant steps to limit what hate speech means. American free speech is very broad. We make a lot of civil liberties, and we make a lot of liberty for what free speech itself is, and we have more limited understandings of what hate speech might be. So it is actually, in fact, an interesting question. If someone says something like, I want to take back our country on Twitter, and like they might get censored in Europe, what exactly happens? I think what's going to happen is a more geo-blocking of social media, a situation where essentially, I'll increase the volume so we can hear him. I think what's more likely to happen is that John Berger can go and say, "Let's take back your country," and in America that's allowed on Twitter, but it's limited in the UK or the EU. I wouldn't be surprised by this in the slightest. Just really quickly. Remember that this happened with Via Lore, fan art that happened with Emmy Busseau. There was someone that created fan art of Emmy that was limited in the in the European Union, but was not limited in the US. That sort of geo-blocking of content in different instances. I think that is what we're going to continue to see.
12,000 people arrested for things they posted online that some trusted flagger approved by the government, the same government that says what's being said at the Democrat National Committee, we need to take back our country, is hate speech. That's a scary scenario. Is that right?
Yeah, they're massive statistics, and I mean, some of it comes under non-crime hate incidents. So you've said something on social media, someone's taken objection, and you get the knock at the door from the police sort of warning you that if you do this again, something may happen. And this has now been broadened out. I mean, Mr. Price made the point, what is hate speech? How do you define hate speech? And that's the problem, isn't it, with all of these laws, that we finish up in a position where local police forces, etc., have to choose their own interpretations. I think, again, as I said to you earlier, the timing of this
Love how he always starts to scream.
Is perfect because
No,
the head of
say
the
it.
Metropolitan Police
Don't say it.
who
Don't
arrested,
say it. Don't say it. Don't say it.
arrested Graham Linehan at Heathrow Airport. He's thrown the ball back now to the British Home Secretary and the government to say, please tell us.
Okay, he got arrested because he's done a lot more than just write some mean things on the internet, okay? Like, I think this is a little bit like a bad example. Like, I'm not going to lie.
Worse, if I may quickly.
Yep.
Because the Labour government now are intending to pass a law that has a definition of Islamophobia. They're intending to put that into law. And that effectively will mean that criticism of a religion, mocking of a religion, would become an offence. And that's totally against everything. Because, we've always given the Pope a hard time. We've always given the Archbishop of Canterbury a hard time. So we're finishing up kind of with two-tier law and two-tier justice.
Well,
and that's very concerning.
I had one other question I'd like to get for maybe you and Mr. Price, if I could. Speaking of religion, tell me what performative prayer is. This is something we've seen and we've discovered in our
we need to understand really quickly that one of the tweets that got Linehan arrested was he just straight up said that like if a trans woman is in a woman's room, like a woman's bathroom, that you should punch her. Okay, like we need to very clearly understand that this is not Linehan getting arrested because he said like maybe trans women should have played baseball with my daughter. This is someone who is like, punch a trans woman in the bathroom. Like, this is pretty clear-cut situation of like, he's inciting violence. He is telling his following to go like hit trans women. Like, I'm sorry, but like, no, of course. How can someone sit there and like get all upset about the whole like gamer subs bomb threat thing, whatever, and then go around and say like Linehan did nothing wrong though? The man straight up said start punching trans women. Like, I'm looking at the BBC report. He wrote, quote, make a scene, call the cops, and if all else fails, punch him in the balls, using him for a trans woman. Like, this is someone who absolutely is encouraging violence. Like, that's not just like, I don't know if trans women like can get pregnant. This is like someone who's like, you should punch and physically assault transgender women. Like, of course you're gonna get arrested. You get arrested here.
Just very briefly.
I'm fine if the ranking member, okay. I may have to ask you a question after you comment, when you do that.
This is the problem, guys. Like, they're not being honest. This is what we talked about yesterday, the lack of honesty.
Speech. First off, the question of identifying hate speech is not something that happens in a vacuum. In the UK, in Europe, there are very strict rules around the definition of hate speech that connect it not merely to speech, but to incitement. So it's incitement to violence or hatred or discrimination. And I think that's just an important baseline point, that this isn't just about pure speech, it's about the kind of speech that might lead to violence. And related to that, when you mentioned this hypothetical of take back our country, and is that hate speech? My understanding is that that came up in the context of a hypothetical related to persistent harassment of a Muslim girl. And that was the hypothetical. And the question was, in that particular context, did that...
Don't forget, if you don't want any ads, if you want to support the channel, hit that subscribe button or gift a sub. It always helps me a lot. It always helps support the channel a lot.
But these kinds of abstract questions into that kind of context.
Professor, did you agree with the Biden administration when they established the Disinformation Governance Board?
I didn't take a position on that. I do think that disinformation is an issue that...
the government should be deciding what we can say and what we can't?
Absolutely not.
Thank you for the 5 gifted.
I'll give the
Thank you,
ranking
Sarah.
member
Oh my God.
With that, I'll recognize the gentleman from Tennessee.
Thank you.
There's a larger history of the government trying to battle disinformation. It's not necessarily bad to have that exist.
Fine. Good, Codell. I appreciate the chair, my friend and my classmate from 2006.
Classmate.
One of the things I found most heartening about the Codell, we had a tour of Parliament, and along with us were 2 conservative members who were, I think they were
Homer.
the House of Lords, maybe one was in the Lords and one was in the House of Commons, but they talked to us
Is that
about
10 gifted? Thank you.
Magna Carta.
You're so sweet.
And about how it's the basis of our laws, and there was a copy there,
Thank
and
you.
copies here and there and whatever. But how precious the Magna Carta is. And they suggested to us that a legislator, this was in the House of Lords where he spoke, that a legislator is not somebody
That shot
who
seeing the
votes.
woman drink the tea was
A
nasty.
legislator's job is not just to vote.
Aw, good to have you by the
Legislator's
lavender
job is to
incubus.
stand up to an out-of-control executive. Very telling for British Parliament members to
You're going to be
instruct
hearing that
us on
sound for a bit, guys.
what we should be doing, and I thank him for that. I'm a strong supporter of free speech and always have been, but I find this hearing a bit disingenuous because of the problems we have here in America. Free speech includes the speech of those with whom we disagree, people who say vile things, and in my case, I find racist and anti-Semitic and Islamophobic type speech is something I find foul, but it's protected by free speech and offensive speech as well. That does not mean that there aren't limitations, however, and speech can be harmful, dangerous, and infringe on other people's rights. It isn't a free-for-all, though. And the U.S. and our First Amendment does not have a monopoly on what constitutes free speech. There is speech protected by the First Amendment, like corporate
Question, when will this
donations,
be a
which
content issue, not
misplaced
speech
and
issue when discussing online
misapplied.
safety bills? They link
And
that
there
these laws are
times when our
content
legal
issues.
system itself suppresses disfavor.
Well, okay, in America, content and speech are kind of the same thing, you know. So I guess what I would have to ask is, what specifically do you mean by that?
And it dealt with the fact that Britain
Because
is a
I would argue that, for example, oh, that woman in the back's really pretty. Oh my God, she's so gorgeous.
we would not
Oh my
allow
God, she's so pretty. I'm gonna die.
Speech Act
I'm gay.
activities that took place
I would argue that
not control
content and speech are like the same thing in the United States. So here they are the same thing, like it is.
their laws on
All three look
defamation.
cute. Yeah, true.
to contour more to what we
Oh,
see
but
in the
I
First
just
Amendment.
a woman in a
That
suit
might
like
be
that kills me. Like, oh my God, she's so beautiful. I'm gonna die.
2 of my good friends, most
Thanks for the
revered
gift
friends,
sub.
from England.
Good to have you, by the way,
Christopher
and
Hitchens
Bestolus
and
Rex.
Sir Bill Browder.
I feel like you and
They've
Lavender
written
Incubus
books,
go
and they
together.
could be subject to such laws as well. But work on protecting your English authors. From Shakespeare on, they've been pretty good.
And pretty good.
We used to be bipartisan in these efforts to look out for free speech, but President Trump has taken on free speech in ways that would never been thought about. And I think Mr. Lofgren brought some points to Professor Kay. And it's not just laws, it's autocratic actions as well.
So old.
President Trump, as Mr. Dalio said clearly, but so many other people have said it, felt it,
is bringing us on the verge of an autocratic state. And his actions in trying to bring law firms to their knees, colleges to their knees, federal employees, students, et cetera, is anti-free speech, anti-opportunity, and fear for themselves and their futures if they speak out. Even Congress people could be subject in the future, I'm sure, with some of the ways we're seeing this Justice Department act, with questions about their speech. Our president has sued every broadcasting company almost, and they've gone after CNN, they've gone after NBC, and they pick some of these fringe people to pick
The
on
ladies in glasses
the
looks
Ukrainian president.
a lot like
because
my
he's tired.
sister.
It's bizarre what's going on in our country, and I'm concerned. They try to silence and shake down those who don't conform to whatever the president thinks. We need to understand that his review of the Smithsonian exhibits and other African American museum and saying there was too much emphasis on how bad slavery was. I don't know how you could find anything good about slavery. And Edwin Starr, who's a singer, would tell you, slavery like war, there's absolutely nothing good about it.
That's like so true.
We shouldn't be trying to. Professor Kay, how would you compare, from your expertise, how...
If anything, most people don't realize how bad slavery was. Like, they don't truly process that it was basically like a Holocaust. Because it was a genocide.
Comparisons.
Like the fact well, I think right now we're at a very dismal place in the United States. But I do think that it's also worth thinking a bit about some of the issues that Mr. Farage raised. So, for example, he mentioned the issue of a law against Islamophobia. But, you know, there's also a lot of discussion about laws against anti-Semitism and against other attacks.
The thing significantly left out of American public education is how slavery was often implemented through sexual abuse.
Valuable conversations to have. But you can't just sort of pick and choose which censorship or which restrictions are okay and which are not. You really need to have a general view as to what's appropriate. And I think, again, the chairman's point about censorship being a focus on criticism is the appropriate one. And to the extent that we can make that comparison, which country is really doing more, or which countries are really doing more to tamp down, to silence critics, that's the harm to our democracy. And right now I see that more in the United States than I see in Europe or the UK.
Thank you,
I'm a gentleman,
Professor.
Mr. Barber.
And I'd just like to say to you, welcome. I have a lot of British friends and respect for Britain. I have a great time when I'm there, but I'm happy we won the war.
Gentleman, you're back to Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, the statement that Trump is bringing us to the edge of being an autocratic state, in and of itself, disproves the premise of that statement. Think about that. It's absurd. Under the First Amendment, the general proposition is that government should not be regulating the content of its citizens' speech. You have the opposing idea that it's the responsibility of government to decide not only what its citizens should think, but what content they are allowed to see and engage with.
Boom.
Where's the reality of the government regulation of speech may sound like it's a distant, authoritarian notion that won't come to the United States of America, but I would ask you to just think back again. I'm reminded of Orwell's
I can't even begin to imagine,
Think
Kirk.
of the memory hole that people are trying to memory hole right now.
Memory hole.
Some even on this panel, sir, who don't want you to realize how bad a government can be when it attempts to censor right here in the United States. For instance,
1984
President Obama, this is from an article I'd asked unanimous consent. President Obama has been the most aggressive administration in history, not only going after whistleblowers, but after pursuing reporters who write their stories. How about this one? The Biden legacy.
The Biden legacy.
This whole stack, and I'll put these in just a second, is convenient to memory hole what the Biden administration did, what they did to suppress dissent and contrary opinion. I'll get into that in a second.
Guy who went to see 44 within the last month. Obama.
The actions of European governments show that the type of censorship...
Do you mind if I ask, Kirk, do you live in Europe?
But very much doable. Under the guise of public safety, government officials in Europe have suppressed and arrested individuals who have simply engaged in political speech that is arbitrarily deemed to be unspeakable by the government. This kind of regime doesn't just appear on the scene, though. It takes time to develop. And we've seen it here.
I haven't had coffee
and that's
in a minute.
why
It feels
I'm
good.
taking this
Oh,
opportunity
Africa.
to
Got it.
remind you that FISA must be reformed. FISA must be reformed.
I think it's important to note what Kirk is saying here is that Americans oftentimes are really blind to their own history and just how much fucked up shit America did within the history of slavery here and the continuing history if we look at things such as the carceral system, right, and economic discrimination, right, the Jim Crow laws and the new Jim Crow as well said by Michelle Alexander. So I think it's important to note as well that like Americans tend to not just they lack awareness about just how bad slavery was, but that they don't even think of slavery as something that involves significant amounts of not just ripping families apart, but sexual abuse. It involves significant mutilation of of people who were enslaved, of black men and women who were enslaved, and the simple fact that a lot of the most egregious elements of slavery are kept out of American history books because it would make you ashamed of this country.
Trying to regulate when you can't innovate?
I think that's very much the case, sir. We've seen it not just in the area of speech, but obviously, as we were discussing, the Digital Markets Act, data protection, and so on.
I only learned in college.
Europe is facing some very
and
serious
quite frankly, watching Django Unchained also helped me a lot too, because it made me realize how much like the fucked up things that happened in that movie were based on real life. Like, pretty crazy that I had to watch a Tarantino movie to know that.
And into that, then, they're throwing a very wide net out that's affecting all kinds of legitimate speech. We talked about my client Päivi Räsänen in Finland, who's prosecuted for sharing a tweet from the Bible. It's absolutely outrageous, and that becomes now.
A lot of people learned through Django Unchained the elements of sexual abuse that were prominent in slavery for years because, of course, Django gets threatened with castration.
Similarly, Mr. Reed, that's what's going to happen to your app innovators. They're not going to be able to have access to 440 million people in a marketplace in Europe without having to go through essentially government censorship.
Well, I think you hit it earlier when you said that their focus has been on regulating or adding legislation. And it isn't one piece of regulation or one piece of legislation that has caused problems for our innovators, both in the UK, in the EU, and in America. It's been the stacking effect. Because if you start with one regulation, you say, I can handle that, I'll build that into my business. It's when you have one, then two, then four, then six. So what's been the biggest problem for growth has been their answer is that old quip, the beatings will continue until morale improves. We often feel that way about regulation. Innovation.
Does anyone feel like there's a lot of like strange like sexual energy here, like memory hold, the beatings thing? Just talking about there's like some kind of eroticism of censorship.
And their liberal understanding of civil rights and the ability to speak one's mind openly without fear of arrest or censorship.
Baffling how
or
Americans don't seem to know how they invade the
by
third world. Yeah,
government.
it's hump day.
I think what went wrong in many ways is we forgot why we actually had those liberties, had those freedoms in the first place. We forgot that, as I mentioned, I touched on earlier, we forgot the huge sacrifices that were made by citizens alive at that time to defend those principles against tyranny and against dictatorship. We've kind of lost our way in understanding why we are.
You can't be speaking like that.
And I think that has permeated through the education system. Well, I'm not sure we've been teaching good values. The slavery comment was made earlier. I completely understand. There's nothing good about slavery. But take our country, we spent decades driving slavery off the high seas. So whilst we were perpetrators to begin with, we actually, in the end, drove it off the high seas. So we need to teach our kids a sense of balance.
There's nothing good about slavery, but it's such a scary phrase to hear.
That's been made.
This bitch said memory hold.
Mr. Chairman, I have some
What did you mean by that?
Gentleman is recognized.
This one, GDP growth comparison EU to US 1998 to 2023. This one, Biden's press freedom legacy, empty words and hypocrisy. Massive government censorship during and about COVID from the New Civil Liberties Alliance. The Fifth Circuit agrees that federal officials unconstitutionally coerced or encouraged online censorship under the Biden administration. This one, information during the pandemic suppressed.
See, This is what I'm talking about, guys. So much junk claims here from the Republicans, right? So much junk claims here from conservatives, right? And they're using up all this time to try to point to say, well, Biden's the problem, Democrats the problem, etc. They're censoring us. Instead of sitting there and trying to use this moment as an opportunity to talk about, say, what's happening that actually is a pressing online censorship issue in the U.S. What's going on with MasterCard, with Visa, with PayPal, with Stripe, with Texas SB 20, right? They could use this hearing as an opportunity to raise the alarm on that, and they're never going to.
Okay. Britain's emerging police state. Knock, knock. It's the thought police. As thousands of criminals go uninvestigated, detectives call on a grandmother. Her crime, she went on Facebook to criticize Labour councillors. This one. UK steps up free speech crackdown as armed police arrest comedy writer Graham Linehan at Heathrow Airport.
Oh, not the Graham Linehan glaze.
Release your online speech. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We bet, without objection.
You mentioned
Mr.
kicking
Chairman,
Roblox,
I'd like
yeah.
to offer 2 unanimous consent requests. I'm not going to challenge the farce as much as the gentleman and the others, but 2 that
Look how many people are missing.
record letters to you, 1 to you and 1 to Commissioner Verkunen, pushing back on the framing of this hearing from 30 EU and U.S. academics.
Thank you. Without objection. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Thank
George.
you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Farage, welcome to the United States of America. This isn't your first time here, correct?
Correct.
You were here in 2024 in Milwaukee, weren't you?
I've been coming here since 1982 on a very regular basis. I work for American companies.
What
for many,
purpose
many
were
years.
you coming to Milwaukee for? Why did you come to Milwaukee?
I've been in Milwaukee many times. I think that particular
In
event
2024
was
was
a convention.
the convention, the Republican
I think
convention.
that's right. I think you're right.
The Trump convention,
I think you're right. Very good.
where Trump was coronated.
Well, he won, didn't he? I mean, yes,
He-
that's
he had
that's what
already
kinda
won.
happens,
We already
you
knew
know. I mean,
who had won.
It's called
And
political
it was
parties.
his coronation, and you attended, and you also attended Trump rallies, correct?
Oh my God.
I've
The
attended lots of
cojones
Trump
on
Make
this
America
man.
great again rallies.
Yes.
He's got a nice
And you
voice.
Upbeat,
publicly-
optimistic, happy,
you-
wonderful, joyous
you
events.
publicly
yes.
endorsed
I
his,
thoroughly enjoyed them. I've even spoken of
You
a couple.
endorsed him for president, and you attended his election night watch party.
I did.
And you
Guilty.
consider Trump to be your mentor, correct?
No.
He's not your mentor?
No.
But
No.
Sorry.
he is somebody who you want the support of, and you have the support
Yes,
of.
I do. I think he's a very, very brave man.
Because
I
you
think
are
his view
getting
of the
ready to
world
run for
is,
Prime Minister of Great Britain, correct?
Oh, I've been trying for years, yeah.
And as it stands right now, you head up a party. How many seats in the Parliament are there?
Brave.
651, if you include the speaker, that is.
650.
Yes.
And how many are a part? How many seats does your party hold?
How many seats did the opinion poll say we're going to get next time? Is that
Well,
your
no,
question?
I mean,
oh, I
the
see.
numbers don't lie. You only have 4
numbers don't
seats,
lie.
right?
I'm afraid so, yes.
And so you are indeed the leader of a fringe party.
Oh, I'm a fringe, all right. Don't worry about that. Yes, absolutely. Everything I've ever done.
And as a fringe party leader seeking to run for Prime Minister of Great Britain, you need a lot of money in order to
need a
blow up
lot of
like the
money.
MAGA movement has blown up.
What you need is a message of truth and a message of hope.
Well, you need money also, right?
Money's helpful, but it's not the primary thing
So
you
the
need.
first
no.
thing that
no, you're
came
wrong.
out of the first thing that came out of the chair's mouth this morning during his
so
opening
based.
statement had to do with Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
carrying water for Elon Musk today, aren't you?
From what I can see, Elon Musk is abusive about me virtually every single week. But it's a free country, so
I mean, but you
he's
never
entitled
stopped
to do that.
trying to ingratiate yourself
Wrong.
with him.
Wrong.
Wrong.
I mean,
No,
and
wrong.
you are familiar with the
No,
fact.
wrong. I have.
You are familiar with the
I've had
fact,
public.
Mr. Farage,
I have had a
that
public fallout with Elon Musk.
Donald Trump's campaign benefited to the
I-
extent of $250 million from
you wanna-
Elon Musk.
Well, I mean, how much?
You
did,
are familiar with that,
How much
correct?
did Mrs. Zuckerberg give to the Democrats? I mean, this is what happens, and people are
But he didn't give any money
on Musk.
to
Let me be clear.
to the
I have had
Democrats.
This is a fantastic dressing down of Farage.
bros,
I am
and you are
going-
here today
I'm going to answer
to
your
impress
question.
all of those tech bros,
You can
including
keep going as
Elon
long as
Musk.
you
Isn't
want.
that correct?
I'm going to answer your question very, very honestly.
You need money from Elon Musk in order to
I
get
have.
elected Prime Minister of Great Britain. That's the bottom line.
We
Isn't that correct?
We consider all day, as long as the chairman allows us. I don't mind. I had a very public falling out with Elon Musk.
But you're still trying to get some money from him, though.
Over a political issue.
He's
It's
very
not
embarrassed.
About the
And
prior
you can see it.
disputes.
Sorry,
You're
it was a
trying to
fundamental-
You're trying to ingratiate yourself with the tech bros by coming over here and
Can I get a
trying
cup-
to.
Can I get a cup of coffee or something?
And,
whilst
and
this
you're
goes on?
arguing.
We'll be here a long time.
What you're arguing is that the citizens of Great Britain should pay a tariff if these tech companies are not allowed to violate the laws of Great Britain.
No, I'm not. That was a falsehood put out by the British Prime Minister
You
today.
didn't say
at
in your
Prime Minister's
statement-
questions. I have never.
In your statement.
I have never suggested anything
Your
of the
statement,
kind.
you don't
My
call for
statement is very
tariffs
clear.
as tools to
My
force
statement is
Great
very
Britain's-
clear. My statement is very.
You are not
It
calling
might surprise
for,
you.
You are not
Mr.
calling
Johnson.
for
It might surprise you to know
tariffs and
that,
trade
that
sanctions.
trade. That trade. You may not know this, but trade between our countries is actually rather important. You are the biggest investor in our country, and we're the biggest investor in yours.
Done is
And-
come
and
over
Time of
friends.
the
here.
gentleman from
And
Georgia has
friends.
expired, but the gentleman
What you've
should be able
done,
to say
sir, is
some kind
come
of
here
response.
to the United
Regular
States
order,
to
Mr.
argue
Chairman.
The
that
time-
your
He's been
citizens
rude,
should
he's been
pay a
disgusting,
tariff.
he's been hilarious.
Hang on.
No.
The gentleman's time has expired. I feel like we should give Mr. Farage a chance to respond to one of the many questions he was not allowed to respond to. So we'll give you 30 seconds, Mr. Farage, and then we'll move on to our next one. Because I know Mr. Farage does have to leave in about an hour, so we want to get through as many members as we can.
Number one, I had a public fallout over a political issue with Elon Musk. I can't be bullied by anybody.
What is this
I haven't
hearing
changed my
about?
mind.
Just-
Last time I looked, he was being spectacularly rude about me yesterday. That's life. If we believe in free speech, we live with it. What I have made very clear.
Fixated on.
What I have
Hang on,
made.
hang on.
Sorry, no, this is my turn, I
Yeah,
think.
Yeah, you got another
Thank you,
15
Mr.
seconds.
Chairman. What I've made perfectly clear in this paper is the situation we've got with successive pieces of legislation, including now the Online Safety Act, is a danger to trade between our countries. And allies and friends and trading partners have honest conversations with each other. I hope many American companies and politicians have honest conversations with the British
done
government.
it.
I've not suggested sanctions at all in any way.
Good luck on your race.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd remind my colleague from Georgia that President Trump was openly nominated after decisively winning.
Okay, it's important to note here that as frustrating as that might be if you're in Farage's shoes, his handling of that was particularly bad. And anything positive that he wanted to do legitimately here, if he actually cares about OSA, although I think the representative from Georgia made a fantastic point that he is looking for a handout from Daddy Musk. Farage's handling of that was particularly bad. When something like that happens, a lot of times what the goal is in that incident is to attempt to goad the other person to look like they cannot handle themselves emotionally. And Farage lost. Like, he was goaded. Not goated, but goaded. If you look at the comparison of a somewhat insistent but calm, rational, not raising his voice politician versus Farage looking pressed, looking in the hot seat, that doesn't look good for Farage. And that was done on purpose to make him look like a fool, right? Now, you can sit here and say this is not good for the hearing, that's bad, Farage makes good points. And I actually do, I can't believe I'm saying this, but the points that Farage makes about the OSA are good. And he's making them because he understands there's a power vacuum in the sense that there is no one trying to represent the goals, trying to represent the interests of British citizens that do not like the OSA. So he sees that as a good opportunity that can combine with getting support from Elon Musk. But the way he handled that has significantly embarrassed him in a way that is probably going to be detrimental to his goals and represents a larger issue that Farage has always had and the Reform Party has always had, which is that they don't look very professional.
Government. That's the very definition of authoritarianism. Mr. Farage, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we are as
Is it just clip
citizens,
farming? It always is.
should be free to make our minds up, to express our opinions, to a large extent to make our own mistakes.
Yeah, the UK IP was a disaster. Just think about fucking Sargon of Akkad. Like, Carl Benjamin is like now considered like such a disgrace. He, in his own way, kind of had the falling out that Milo Yiannopoulos also had. Like, Milo still's got influence, and so does Carl Benjamin as well, but not on the level that they used to.
But very quickly put their hands up and apologize and learn their lesson. That's kind of how the world is. I do not want government to be the arbiter of what I should think.
We have a word for that. It's demos kratos, rule by the people.
So yes,
Democracy.
I'm with you on that. I also agree with you that COVID, I touched on this earlier, it was during COVID when rational debate about many important issues, be it mask wearing, be it lockdowns, rational debate on these things was frankly stamped out, and this was supported by big social media companies, many, not GB News obviously, but many TV stations, etc. It's a very dark period that we're coming out.
In this country, what we're discovering is that was being done under pressure by the FBI, directed by the executive branch of the government under Joe Biden. But just briefly, how did this happen to the UK and the...
Every word out of their mouth, it's Joe Biden. It's just, he's not been president for like a year or whatever now.
The EC, as
6-7 months,
it was
whatever.
a huge mistake, in my opinion.
Get over
We
it.
forgot about common law.
You can't blame everything on Joe Biden.
Enjoyed too.
Joe Biden.
We sort of gradually transferred
Joe
to
Biden.
a European way of thinking.
It is telling that the Republican Party is in a state of disarray because every word out of their mouth is Joe Biden, Joe Biden, Joe Biden. Joe Biden's not the president anymore. You've had 8 months. The problems that you think Joe Biden has caused, you've had the time to supposedly fix them. If you have to keep reminding the people of the past and say Joe Biden was worse, though, then fundamentally you've proven that you're not fixing things. You just have to keep people stuck in the past. And people increasingly are more forgiving of Joe Biden. You know why? Because as much of a dumb president as he was, and truly an awful person, an awful president, Trump 2.0 has shown that there are insanely new lows that a president can take to defile the office. And it's an office that a lot of people have already failed to respect for a number of years now.
What is happening in the United Kingdom right now is we want a government that comes in.
Still mad that black man was president.
Gets rid of all these laws.
They are, though.
And starts again. And starts
Burns
on the
when came out
basis,
mask saying real
yes, we
world
want to
wear
try and
masks.
protect
The
kids.
soft mask of
We will
America.
do whatever we can that is practical
It is
to
weird.
protect kids from
Fucking
serious
weird.
harm online. But we will get back to the idea that I could insult you, you could insult me.
He's so mad.
Mr. Raskin and I can have our chats, but we do it, in a spirit that's not insightful and in a way that honors those who built our great country.
He's so mad.
Thank you.
He's so upset.
Gentleman,
I'm
back.
sure
Hold
he's particularly upset that he got dressed down by a black man. I feel it.
You know, it wasn't too long ago that Democrats and Republicans on this committee together agreed to undertake a 16-month investigation into the anti-competitive practices of big tech companies. I represent many of them in Seattle, and proposed bipartisan legislation, which actually passed this committee, to restore fairness and competition for consumers and small businesses. That included the American Choice and Innovation Online Act, or ACOIA, which included similar common-sense structural solutions to what the EU included in the Digital Markets Act. And it was a real recognition that these big tech companies are squelching competition and innovation, and that hurts consumers. It's a big turnaround then that suddenly the Republican majority wants to do something as absurd as use trade negotiations to help bolster big tech in Europe when EU has undertaken the very smart solutions that fight back against big tech monopolies and protect consumers and small businesses. Maybe it's linked to the fact that these big tech companies are now pouring money into Donald Trump's campaign funds. I don't know. Maybe it's because they're making all kinds of deals to screw consumers and preference giant corporations in exchange for campaign contributions and a 24-hour...
This is the problem, is that the Democrats are coming into this conversation with very important information about the Trump administration engaging in censorship in the U.S. They came armed with that proof, but when the OSA comes up, their policy is we need Keir Starmer to be hug-boxed, right?
Apparently the topic of discussion today. In fact, one of our witnesses here claims to represent, one of the Republican witnesses claims to represent small and medium-sized app developers, but his organization gets more than half of its funding from Apple. A very giant corporation that those same small and medium-sized app developers are trying to fight. Make it make sense for me. Now we have this hearing centered around so-called free speech and so-called censorship. Not here in America, but in Europe.
Europe.
What about right here at home on U.S. soil, the censorship by the Trump administration, the Republican Party, on anything that they don't agree with? Let's just take a recent example. Ramesa Ozturk, a PhD student at Tufts University, wrote an op-ed in the student newspaper calling for the university to divest from Israel. It was a simple exercise of her First Amendment free speech rights. She committed no crime, she didn't bully or harass anyone, she didn't incite violence towards anyone. Action was totally peaceful. And yet, what happened? In March, the Trump administration revoked her student visa, sent masked men to kidnap and disappear her, forcing her into an unmarked car, and detained her for 45 days. Professor Kaye, how does this kind of abuse, utilizing the immigration system, in this case for now, can extend to U.S. citizens, to green card
See, here's the thing, right? Like, the point that she makes here, very good. Yes, like, the censorship is here in the U.S., and it's implemented in myriad ways to create a chilling effect. The problem is, none of them are going to cross the line and say, hey, but, you know, cross over and say, hey, the OSA, by the way, also bad. And that's a problem, because it means that these Democratic politicians are more concerned about, you know, kind of poking the eyes of Republican politicians, even if they have a good point, than they are defending our civil liberties.
And free speech right, as you
good to have you, Wolf.
explained
Hi, Frosty Fable.
When they're
Scattered approach, I agree.
and set up for deportation
Economic concern, trade, not about civil
solely
liberties.
because of an op-ed.
I think it's not quite that. They're not actually.
That same kind of visa situation now is not going to be writing that op-ed. And that's not just a harm to them. That's not just chilling their speech. That's also a harm to all of us who would benefit from hearing those kinds of views.
In fact, right now, the Trump administration is reviewing all social media of visa applicants to see if they've posted any anti-Trump or pro-Palestinian sentiments. How does that
That's true. That's happening
our
right
free
now.
speech rights?
Well, it's the same answer. It's a deterioration of our public debate in this country. It's exactly this kind of, I think that Mr. McClintock had said before, putting side by side different ideas, and that's an interference with that.
So quickly, another example. In June, a Spanish-language reporter named Mario Guevara was live streaming a gathering of Americans protesting against Trump's immigration policy. The police arrested him on bogus misdemeanor charges that were later dropped. A few days later, he was detained by ICE. Now we've got a government that arrests a student for writing an op-ed, filters the speech of visitors, and arrests a journalist for covering a protest. How does that compare to free speech practices of other countries?
Well, it does compare with authoritarians who.
Okay, I'm going to talk over the professor here because I'm not going to lie. Like, I think Homer's making a really good point that we need to address. This is supposed to be a hearing that's about OSA and DSA and some of the European laws that are affecting free speech on the internet, right? And I will absolutely say that, yes, like, this conversation is being held in somewhat bad faith and is slightly disingenuous. A lot of it is about trying to make Europe look like they're censoring conservatives. And, you know, one could argue that, like, some of these policies go over the line with censorship of conservatives as well. You can make that argument. I'm saying that to throw a bone to some of the folks here that are more conservative leaning in my audience, to acknowledge that, hey, I feel like you could make that argument. I would at least like to hear what your personal argument would be if you feel that way. But I think, one, the Graham Lennon situation is crazy because he obviously should have been arrested because he said punch a trans woman in the bathroom. Like, that's, you can't do that. Like, that's inciting violence. And two, these Democrats are more concerned with proving that actually Trump's the bad guy.
A final one from I think it's the App Association, and it's titled, "Apple is Top Funder of Lobby Group That Says It Represents Small Developers."
Yeah. Without objection. If I could.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I have one more here.
Okay, go right ahead.
This is an article entitled "The False Choice Between Digital Regulation and Innovation."
Without objection.
Thank you. I yield back.
Quickly, Mr. Reed, is your association fighting Apple?
Pardon me?
Is your association fighting Apple?
Fighting Apple?
Fighting Apple?
We disagree with Apple on multiple issues, as well as for all of our sponsors. Our membership is the small businesses that many of you have met when we've had our fly-in every year.
Okay, great. Seems to me your association uses Apple. That's where your apps go. I don't think you're fighting Apple. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized for 5 minutes.
Before I bother mentioning Trump,
was
we're
the
talking about
Centers
Censorship
for
Bond in
Disease
general
Control
overseas.
correct in 2020 about the handling of COVID? You know, the chairman laid out all the
Republicans started this conversation essentially saying that like they're being censored online is kind of their underlying argument. So Democrats feel the need to respond. That's why.
Speak to that. I mean, I remember the time like we all did, a time of.
But it's become a clusterfuck for that reason.
shutting down schools, things like that, that have set kids behind. See, because it's to Representative McClintock's point that wouldn't this administration want to change some?
That's where I agree with you, though, Jace, because these Democrats need to address OSA, and Rankin, as a high member of the committee that's a Democrat, has dismissed the idea that OSA is a problem, and so it's been a shit show since.
Shouldn't they change those people?
Well, that's just not my understanding of why people have been.
Are you familiar, Professor K, with the case Berenson versus Biden, which is a censorship case where Alex Berenson, a reporter, was deplatformed on Twitter?
I'm not familiar with that one.
I would suggest that you take a look at that because the Biden administration weaponized themselves against Mr. Berenson and stifled his speech on Twitter. What college are you a professor at again?
University of California, Irvine.
How many classes are you teaching this semester?
This I teach one class right now.
One class this semester.
Mr.
Farage,
sure.
I want to thank you so much for coming to the great state of Wisconsin, of which I represent part of it, including Milwaukee. I hope you had a good time there.
I've always had a good time in Milwaukee. No
I agree,
question.
Jace.
Wonderful breweries, friendly people. Love it.
You're welcome back anytime. I want to thank the ranking member for giving us a tutorial on free speech. Mr. Farage, did you instruct anyone on this panel, including the chairman, to instruct us to stifle the ranking member's speech? Did you?
No, absolutely not. Of course not.
Can you comment on the key issue before the far right that we heard about earlier? What is that key issue in Europe right now that the far right is heavily engaged?
Farage is very anti-OSA, but there's also speculation he's trying to get Elon's favor.
If you're opposed to illegal immigration on a mass scale and the huge cost to the taxpayer and the risk to our communities, then and if you like the flag, our national flag, then apparently you're far right.
So that illegal immigration issue that was very informative to the election in 2024 in America, the same thing is happening in Europe? Is that accurate?
It's a very similar argument in many, many ways, and therefore the definition of far right, I think, now applies to about 2/3 of the British population.
So I think about someone who's very famous from your country, Ms. J.K. Rowling, who wrote one of the finest series of books, the Harry Potter series, that has ever been in print, who I believe is self-defined as a liberal, as we call them in America. Hasn't she even been threatened for a position she's taken in regards to transgenderism?
Yes, she very much comes from the liberal wing of politics historically, but she's taken a view that women should be safe in women's spaces. That means changing rooms, etc. That's all she said. And by the way, that's something that our Supreme Court recently actually did back up, the fact that there are fundamental differences. And this is not to launch an attack on anyone that's trans, just to bring some common sense in. And she has faced cancel culture and abuse on a huge scale.
Culture.
I would just, one other comment in regards to the ranking member's opening statement. He was saying that we are stifling speech here in America, including PBS, by defunding them. I would suggest that the ranking member look at the news that came out in the past week. It is very good news for PBS, where the Ford Foundation and other foundations have said they're going to put in tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars
join me,
to make
folks.
sure that they stay on the air. Protecting the American taxpayer, I think that is a great thing
those green
that
text.
we were able to do
I'm gonna go
with the
vomit.
one big
British.
beautiful bill.
British.
final question
One
for
big
Mr.
beautiful
Price.
Beautiful bill.
How is
British.
the problem going to be fixed? And can America help?
No.
Yes, America can help. The
British.
light, the spotlight.
Well,
that
now
has
it's
already been
Irish.
shone on
Now
the
it's-
problem
now-
by the
now it's Irish,
administration,
as we learned.
by the amazing work that this committee is doing here, is hugely welcomed by those of us who
Private
support
insurance
the human
from
right to free
public sector,
speech.
yeah.
We have people who are suffering under prosecutions, unjust prosecutions in Europe right now. I've outlined a lot of them in my written submissions, and it's only because of the support that's coming from this side of the Atlantic that we're able to see possibly a brighter future.
And we will continue those efforts.
Thank you.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Fun PBS reel. He was not ready.
Thank you,
He was
Mr.
not ready.
Chairman. You know, when I was a professor of constitutional law, I used to teach my students that freedom of speech is like an apple, and everybody wants to take just one bite out of the apple. Somebody doesn't like left-wing speech. There's a bite. Somebody doesn't like right-wing speech. Somebody doesn't like feminist speech. Somebody doesn't like sexist speech. And everybody just wants to take one bite. But if we let everybody take a bite, at the end of the day, there's no apple left. It's all gone. So if you want to defend free speech and you want a society that's defined by free speech, you've got to accept even the speech you oppose, the speech that you abhor. Now, Professor Kaye, we want to try to bring some objectivity to the conversation. I looked up the Reporters Without Borders rankings of every country in the world, according to press freedom. Norway was number 1. North Korea was number 179. It's like a totalitarian dungeon. The UK was number 20. The US was number 57 under Trump, down from 45, where it was before. Russia, which some people here lionize, was at 171, right? So if we were going to undertake a serious study of the state of press freedom all over the world, for example, where should our focus be?
Burger.
I appreciate that question. I have a very long list that I could highlight.
But just tell us methodologically, quickly, how we should go about doing it if we wanted to undertake this in a serious way.
Absolutely. I mean, I would really use the lens of what do we need as a democracy in order to be well-informed, in order to make choices about our democracy, to make choices about our health. What do we need?
Thank you for the follow,
we need an
Edel.
open press.
Asking
We need open government. We need access. We absolutely don't want to see websites scrubbed, as this administration has done. So I would look at it through that lens, through the lens of
Press
what we
freedom
need
good, but
in
again,
order to
how
have
is
a
this
democracy.
about OSA online censorship?
Gotcha. So, Mr. Farage, first of all, to be called charming by you, a man of your evident erudition and dazzling brilliance, is undoubtedly a Lifetime Achievement Award for me, so I will hold it closely. But I wanted to ask you about your commitment to the freedom of speech universally. I think it's a principle that you advocate for everyone, not just for people who are in your party or people you agree with. You said that there should not have been a protest against the Gaza war in the UK. And then
You could hear the
when
groan.
it went ahead, the police refused to shut it
We
down.
love
You
our big,
called them
beautiful
gutless
professors.
for not shutting it down. Do you regret having opposed that, given that there was no violence there and there were 700,000 people who wanted to express themselves that day?
I have not opposed people standing up and protesting in favor of people living in Gaza at all. There was one particular day, and it was the Sunday nearest November the 11th, which was when we had big memorial services in London, and I think a march being allowed to go ahead on that day would have been a mistake. Any other day, fine.
Oh, I see. Who gets to decide that?
Well, I think actually something that is
The
embedded
Raskin shit-eating
in the
grin is
country,
crazy
something that is
here.
absolutely fundamental to
That's why we have a written constitution. You might take that idea back to the UK with you.
Oh!
Because the freedom of speech applies
Burger
365
win!
days a year here under the First Amendment, not 364 or 363, depending on some politicians heckling the government and telling them to shut
we
down
have
free speech.
we have allowed mass
shit-eating
pro-Gaza
grin on
demonstrations in London weekend after weekend.
No thanks to
after
you. All right,
weekend.
let me
This
change.
was
Let
one
me try another one.
particularly sensitive day. That's all.
I got you. It was a sensitive day.
Thank you, Desiree
And I thought
Stokes.
that's what the freedom of speech was about. You have a right to engage in speech that other people consider offensive or
we
insensitive.
get a
But in any
bird?
event,
Every right
you've
to
made
do
yourself
it.
clear,
They can
Mr.
do it
Farage.
364 days a year if they want.
You've
Not
made
on
yourself
that day.
clear to your constituents in Claxton today. Let me ask you this. You've banned journalists from your political events that you disagree with, haven't you?
No, in fact, I'm the only.
Really? At your convention, you didn't ban journalists and revoke their credentials?
You know, I the average press conference, I take 25 questions.
No, that wasn't my question. Mr. Farage, we're politicians, so we see what you're doing. I'm asking you a direct question.
Well, thank you. I'm very pleased
I'm
you
asking
do.
you a direct question, and I hope you can answer it. Why do you ban journalists who oppose your views from coming to your events? Why did you tell your party...
Notice he's not as mad
why
when
did
a
you tell
white
the
guy is
local
doing
government not to do interviews
Notice he's
with
not as
your
mad.
local newspaper?
I am the most open person to any journalist.
Undoubtedly,
ever
you're
they've
the
met.
handsomest man in
And
the
I do
world.
it-
But I'm asking you a different
I do it
question,
every
okay?
day.
That's not my question.
Notice he's not
My
mad
question
that
to
a
you
white
is-
guy's doing
And
this.
it's legit. Why do you ban journalists that you disagree with from your political events, like from your convention?
But he was furious when a black
Okay, and
politician
you say
did
you've
this.
never done that?
I can't think, if I go back the last 25 years, I can't think of banning anybody. But I mean, maybe somebody else did. But look,
I see. It was somebody else who
the
did it.
point. I take more questions.
All right.
From
Do you have
and all
any
the other
objections?
leaders added up together.
Okay. Mr. Price, let me ask you. You're an honest man. Do you have any objection to the things you've heard about what Donald Trump is doing in the United States of America, going
Yeah.
after law firms,
Farage
for example,
was
banning them
furious
from federal
when a
buildings
black
and
man
federal
was doing the
courthouses,
dressing down.
stripping them
Not
of
so much for
security
white guy.
clearance, saying they can never
He
get
was
federal
furious,
jobs or
embarrassed.
contracts because he doesn't like something one of the lawyers at the firm did. Do you think there's a First Amendment problem with that, as our courts have found?
There's a lot of information you've put into that. It's good to talk to you again after London.
Yeah, have you followed that at all?
I haven't. I have to be
I see.
perfectly honest with you now.
Okay. Do you have any problems with anything Donald Trump has done with respect to...
I'm really sorry about these politicians speaking the mic. It's not good.
Or you just haven't followed it?
I'm not as well. There are plenty of people here better informed on American matters than I.
And we are. So thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for your indulgence. I yield back.
I think the gentleman, my guess is Mr. Farage takes press questions probably as often as President Trump does. These are two guys who aren't afraid to talk to the press and take any question that comes to them.
Dope.
We've seen that.
Those are the
we've
font
seen
for
that
names.
displayed
One is
time
big
time
and readable
again.
on a white background. The
The
other
gentleman
one is
from
small on
California, Mr.
background.
Kiley, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And
Panel
it
names
was,
created
an honor
versus-
to be with you and the ranking
So the politicians speaking versus the panelists, and the panelists obviously made untrue material because they have to print out a lot of these versus these names are used over and over and over again.
It's gotten very interesting on both occasions. But I'd actually like to direct my questions to you, Mr. Price, at first. It's good to see you again. I think that those of us on the trip were really alarmed by the ways in which the tide is turning against free speech in the UK and the EU. And I think that there actually was quite a bit of bipartisan agreement among the members of our delegation on a number of these issues. So I was hoping you could give us a little
I'm really
context
sorry that they're
of
peeking the mic.
what
I
you
can't do
think,
anything about it.
explains this. And I think that we understand that not every country needs to have has a First Amendment or needs to have the exact same standards or the exact same exceptions or the exact same ways that the law is applied. But we've always, I think, felt it important that we have an alliance with our European allies around the issues of freedom that stands in contrast to authoritarian regimes around the world, like in Russia, like in China, places where they don't have free speech. And so to the extent that these values are fraying among our allies, then it really harms our ability to stand up for the values of freedom around the world. So what do you think is going on? How can we sort of strengthen our alliance with our European allies around the issue of freedom of speech?
Thank you, sir. Well, what we've seen, sadly, over many decades, and it's accelerating, has been a consistent use of overbroad, vague laws to crack down on speech that's regarded as provocative or unorthodox. And I can give you, and I have given examples of the clients that I'm involved in representing, where they've been simply speaking about their faith publicly or where they've been offering to talk to people. So things have reached a crisis point, though, and this is why I think it's important that Vice President Vance and the administration have intervened. And one thing I would say, without divulging any contents of conversations, but Representative Raskin and I had quite a good conversation about just how bad things had become in Europe. And I agree with you. I think there is a bipartisan realization, certainly on this committee, and I commend the work that it's doing.
I would say
the nature of the problem in Europe.
A lot of what you're seeing here is posturing around censorship as a general issue, and not a lot of conversation about what this is supposed to be about, which is how OSA and DSA, the American Online Safety Act I mean, UK's Online Safety Act and the Europe's equivalent, the EU's equivalent, have been very dangerous to free speech. It's devolved into something about posturing around censorship.
Implicates the free speech rights of Americans. But I would hope that moving forward,
It's
we
pretty
can
bad.
try to work with our counterparts in Europe to try to get back to having these shared values around freedom of speech, and we don't continue to see a divergence. Mr. Reed, I also wanted to ask you about the DMA because
They're kind of trying to low-key clip farm.
App developers, but we also spoke with folks who represent Apple and Facebook and others, and it's a matter of public record the way that these companies are now sort of uniquely targeted under this law and the similar law in the UK. And honestly, it caused me to sort of see some of the ongoing negotiations around tariffs and other issues.
I thought there was going to be like a conservative dressing down of OSA, but this is just a shit show.
Companies are being targeted with the
Highly
DMA really is a tax or imposes or is a direct transfer of wealth from our country overseas. And these are some of these sort of non-tariff barriers that American countries are now facing. So could you give me your perspective on that and the DMA more broadly?
Right. It's ironic that, as you say, it's a non-tariff trade barrier, but the ultimate biggest loser is usually the smaller and medium-sized companies. Earlier, we heard a member of this committee just talk about bills here in the United States. The irony of those who supported those bills were also billionaire companies. We joked about the fact that it was the trillionaires versus the billionaires who went to war. And the problem when that happens, if any of you run a small business, is the small guy gets crushed. And what's happening with the DMA in Europe is their desire to put pressure on the U.S. companies means that there are fewer services, fewer features, and less trust are available for the smaller businesses to take advantage of. And that's how we get crushed, and that ends up being as you say, a non-tariff trade barrier. Because it puts the very companies that could compete with these giants at a disadvantage when they have to meet those new tests.
It's all been about the cancel culture.
Thank you, and I think that this is going to be an important issue for us to remain focused on.
Nothing good's happened. Hi, Frost people.
Alleviate these barriers that our companies are facing that honestly are hindering innovation in Europe as well. I yield back.
All right.
Yield back to the chair.
Yeah, do whatever the fuck you want.
Real clear on the most recent situation. Maybe I'll direct this to Mr. Farage. So Graham Lineman is an Irish citizen who posted something while in America and then gets arrested when he goes to the UK.
God.
For some, quote, offensive post online.
He told someone to punch a trans woman.
Yeah, that's where this is all headed. That's exactly where this is all headed.
He told someone to punch a trans woman. This is a joke. You can't post that. The same way you can't post, I'm going to go bomb the Gamer Subs booth or whatever. Like, this is a joke. That's not a free speech protection.
Interesting looking at the DMA, winners and losers, unintended consequences.
Jason's right.
According to a recent report commissioned by the EC,
you can't tweet
the future of European competitiveness.
And it was about, like, violence in the UK. Of course he's going to get arrested. I could tweet that Antarctica and get arrested if I said, like, you should punch someone in New York. You know, like...
Very interesting that a lot of the European entrepreneurs move out of Europe, move to the U.S., specifically California, to grow.
What the fuck is wrong with these politicians?
I'm a Californian, so the health and welfare, the interests of California firms is interest to me. And seeing hundreds of millions of dollars in fines under DMA's nebulous violations.
Anyone who did watch this hoping to get anything out of this about OSA is, nah. None of these politicians even care.
In many ways,
I'm going to crush people to blow under my balls.
I care about encouraging
Danny
California
DeVito?
entrepreneurs. We have the most successful entrepreneurs in the world today.
We've got many big, beautiful
entrepreneurs. They are essentially being targeted by the EU and other foreign regulations. California. This money is better, again, invested in creating jobs in California. And by the way, a lot of these firms that are actually being fined actually pay taxes in California. Today, California recently
I'm going sicko
passed
mode,
up
chat.
Japan,
I'm going
become the
sicko
fourth
mode.
largest economy in the world. California is the number one producer of ag products in the world. Number one in terms of venture capital in the U.S. Number one manufacture. We pay $100 billion more to the
pay
U.S. federal
$1 bajillion
government
more
than we get back on an annual basis. So despite all the challenges we have in California, we actually know how to do it right. And surprisingly, our workforce, visa holders from other countries, workforce, undocumented workers from around the world that actually harvest their crops. Manufacturing, we are the top manufacturer in the United States in terms of state. A lot of undocumented workers there. So California, we actually can manage pretty well. The best managed state, I would argue, in the union. So Mr. Reed, I'm going to ask you, given your association with the small firms, how is the DMA affecting our California firms as they try to grow in the European Union?
The ex-ante regulation creates barriers of entry.
What do you mean by ex-ante? Explain that to me.
In simple terms, it means that the European Union is determining the behavior before the bad act has happened. It's before it happens.
So they're fining before the actual behavior?
They're not just even fining, they're setting the rules by which you could be fined. They are, the best way to think about it is they're saying, Mother, may I? If you remember the game Mother May I, they are asking companies to go forth and say, can we do this? And then the commission says, well, yes, you can, or yes, you cannot. We traditionally in the United States have taken an ex post, meaning, did you deceive someone? Did you lie? Did you cheat? Did you steal? And then you're punished. Unfortunately, the EU is taking a Mother May I approach rather than a punishment approach. And that harms California businesses because it makes it a lot harder to get in the door.
Mr. Price, you're from Irvine. Sorry. Yes? Mr. Price?
Yes. Mr. Price. Mother, may I have
a little bit about
biscuit? Daddy, do you want some
California
sausage?
firms and how the
Daddy,
DMA,
do you want some sausages?
Well, Irvine, by the way, a lot of biotech, high-tech.
I think you might be referring to Professor K.
I was distracted playing with my avatar, I'm not going to lie.
Mr. K.
Mr. K.
Yes. Yes, I teach at the University of California at Irvine.
We can't
screw
people
over
because
to respond to two of the points that you're making, in part because...
You got about 20 seconds. Go.
Thank you. In part because this hearing is entitled as one dealing with censorship, and we're spending quite a bit of time talking about defending companies.
You need to have someone's
two
hub
things I just
history
wanted to
review.
mention. One is,
to be honest, as much as I want to watch this, see what happens next,
doesn't
as long as it's just screwing around and actually plays me. I don't think the rest of it is worth watching.
American companies any more than it does against California companies. And the second is that I think it's important.
I'm going to continue. I'm going to play out the full of this, but I'll have my final takes afterwards. I agree, though, Jace. It's a shit show.
Yes.
They've designed the rules in such a way that they almost perfectly encompass the DSA. So if you're setting the rules and they just happen to throw a net over a particular target group, I think you can legitimately infer from that that was the intention.
The intention was discrimination?
The intention is to throw a dragnet over U.S. companies and turn them into a...
The intention is discrimination against American firms.
That's precisely what the outcome is.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And before I yield, I also have some articles I'd like to submit for the record, if I may.
Yep.
Letter by Chairman Fitzgerald and myself to President Trump, dated April 9th of this year, outlining our concerns with the Digital Marketing Act. Second, report by European Commission, dated September 24th, the future of European competitiveness,
I'm not gonna lie.
which is failing to translate.
I think there'll be like another
innovation.
20-30 minutes max.
Third article, statement by the
Neil's gotta
Chamber
go.
of Progress, dated
Raj
February
got a
10th.
meeting or something.
How Digital Markets Act has become European
Raj just suit his
digital
landing.
curtain. Number 4, article by the Information and Technology Foundation, dated June 30th. 6 ways the DMA is backfiring on Europe. 5th, article Washington Examiner, July 28th. EU regulations impose heavy costs on U.S. companies. Finally, article in the Journal, Wall Street. The tech industry is huge, and Europe's share of it is very small. Thank you, sir.
Without objection. Thank you. Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Texas, recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. I thank you for holding this
Doing a
hearing. I
news
think
sweep while this is
witnesses-
going on.
Mr. Price, you referenced Päivi Räsänen earlier, correct?
Yes, sir.
Can you just real quick, in like 30 seconds, give the quick summary of what the facts are behind that issue with respect to why she is facing prosecution despite having served in Parliament and I believe as a minister in the government?
That's correct, sir. Over 5 years ago, she posted a tweet with a verse from Scripture, and in that tweet, she objected to her church, the Finnish Evangelical Lutheran Church, using church funds to fund the Helsinki Pride Parade. And for that, then, criminal proceedings were launched against her.
And she's been dealing with that for 4 to 5 years, correct?
That's correct, sir. Her case is before the Supreme Court at the end of October.
Facing jail time.
Facing significant fines.
And for having expressed her faith with respect to issues involving marriage in the context of a Bible verse, correct?
That's correct, sir.
And so now we've got, as the chairman illuminated a moment ago, we've got this issue involving Graham Lanahan, who here in the United States made a joke and then is arrested in the UK, correct?
Yes, he's being arrested, or he was arrested for comments that he posted while here.
And that's correct, Mr. Farage, you agree?
It is.
And that joke had something to do with, as I've looked it up, trans-identified males and female-only space, and he made some joke about that issue.
That's exactly punching
them.
them.
So we've got now someone being arrested for alleged transphobia
It's not a
or
joke.
some sort of
It's
hate comment involving a joke.
Saying
on
one
another
should
continent.
punch them.
Now, in the meantime, we've had Mr. Farage talking about Lucy Connolly, right? And her fate, which I understand she got sentenced something like 31 or 32 months for having put out a social media post. Now, that social media post has been alleged to have tied to some incitement. She deleted the post, but the post was in response to violence, right? And on the heels of a whole lot of issues involving crime in the UK. Whatever the connection is, right, we're saying there is crime in the UK. Now, here's my question, Mr. Farage. How do you feel from the standpoint of borders in the UK? Are open borders healthy for either the United States or the UK?
No, they're disastrous.
And are they having a deleterious effect with respect to crime and culture in the UK?
Yes, they are. It's been a debate that's been very difficult to have without being screamed at, but we are now having that debate.
And so now we've got a moment here where we've got someone being put in jail for putting out something on social media that is allegedly transphobic. And so my question is, I wonder what's going to win out? What's going to win out when the questions of Islamophobia and the tenets of Islam mash up against transphobia? What will the determiners of truth in the UK government decide? What will those who make decisions about what we can say and what we cannot say do when these worlds collide? Would you have any comment on that, Mr. Farage?
In the Lucy Connolly case, it's very interesting that this horrific murder of 3 young girls happened. The country was in very deep shock, very deep shock. The government deliberately withheld the truth about who the perpetrator was. And it led to a sea of speculation. It turned out ultimately that the man that committed those murders was in fact UK born, had not come over on a boat,
I'm paying
as was
attention.
being
I'm just doing a
said
news sweep.
on social media. Just goes to show that actually, however bad the news is, people deserve to know the truth about a situation. It stops that frenzy of speculation. Who's going to win these great battles? I think that there is a growing, silent majority, certainly in my country, who object to the two-tier concept that, you know, Lucy Connolly gets 31. And by the way, there were mitigating circumstances for what she said with her own personal situation, but she's arrested very quickly. She's threatened that if she pleads not guilty, she'll go straight to prison and be on remand until the trial, and goodness knows when. We're not defending what she said, but she recognized her error, you know, in a moment of anger and passion and upset, and she withdrew it 3.5 hours later. I think that the answer, Mr. Roy, is that the silent majority will win.
Look, Lucy Connolly said, guys, that she called for mass deportation and set fire to all the hotels, brackets, housing asylum seekers for all I care. If that makes me racist, so be it. This is exactly the gamer subs anime booth bombing situation all over again, okay? Like anime convention bombing booth thing all over again. You can't just say stuff like that over the internet. We are not talking about like, I don't know how you feel about like this person who might be maybe brown, I'm not sure, outside my house. We're talking about, like, burn their hotels, kill them all. Like, that's basically what she's saying in so many words. Sans the kill them all. But she's saying, like, burn them out and deport them all. Like, look, Lucy Connolly saying mass deportation now, that's one thing. Set fire to all the hotels they're in is another. You're inciting violence. We are not talking about an instance where, like, they made a little oopsie. We were talking about punch a trans woman, set hotels on fire. Like, that stuff can't be said on the internet.
Have you heard about the Epstein thing that's going on here?
I have.
You have? What do you think about it?
I'm not going to give comment on anything happening in America. I'm here as a witness.
He's on the files!
I'm here as a witness for what is happening in the United Kingdom and in the European.
Perfect. Let me just go through it. So it's been 9 months, right?
No, I'm kidding, but I don't
we've been
know.
meeting in these hearings. We've not had Pam Bondi here, even though we have jurisdiction over the Department
Bro's
of
like,
Justice.
let's talk
Dan
Epstein.
Bondi.
The gentleman yield.
What does that have to do with what I was saying?
100%. We'll go back and forth. Let me just do my thing.
Okay.
Let me do my thing.
Well, I'm just going to
first,
correct.
and then we'll go
Kash
back.
Patel's coming in 2. I'll give
But
you an
we're
extra 10
gonna
seconds.
do
Kash Patel,
Epstein
Director of
now.
the FBI, is coming in 2 weeks, and the Attorney General's coming in 4 weeks.
Fantastic. But still, we're not doing that this week. The week we're having votes on the Epstein thing. So, you know, Pam Bondi gives the influencers, these Republican influencers, a binder. It says Part 1 of the Epstein files. No one of you saw it. It was quite spectacular. The Attorney General then says the Epstein list is on her desk. Then DOJ issues a memo, says there is no list. Then, you have any questions about any of that? We've had no hearings.
What the fuck does this have to do with the OSA? I mean, I am very concerned about the Epstein files. But what the fuck does this have to do with anything that's on the docket
Gave
for this?
binders to Republican influencers. This committee said no questions on.
This is awful.
Expired at the Department of Justice. Then hold on.
Well, it sounds like you're going
no.
in the next few weeks.
Well, Mr. Farage, we can talk soon, but not yet.
It was so funny.
So,
The
then
docket's gone out the window.
the president comes out and says the whole thing's a hoax. He blasts his own base. He blames Barack Obama. I mean, he hasn't been president for a very long time. Republicans then in committee vote against the release in the Rules Committee. Then Republicans refuse to go back in the Rules Committee because they're getting blasted for their vote, getting crushed by their own base. Congress leaves a day early. Then the administration sends the Deputy Attorney General to meet with Maxwell in jail. He happens to be Trump's former personal attorney. She says something favorable about the president. Miraculously, she gets transferred to a minimum security prison. The president starts talking about how he has the right to pardon her if he wanted to. The leaks to the Wall Street Journal then stop. We come back from break. We have the Massey petition. Comer does a document dump where 97% of
She's
his
like, nah, I'm
documents
good.
are
This is
already
cooked.
public. How long has he had those documents? Why hasn't he released them
This
for the
is
last
a
6 weeks? Does it the
clusterfuck.
day of the vote. Then Republicans drop a non-binding resolution trying to kill the Massey discharge petition.
have to do with
The White House said
anything.
passing the Massey discharge petition is a hostile act. Wow. That's a lot of distraction.
This is equivalent like when you're at a party and you're really trying to talk to a hot girl, and this guy comes up to you, he's like, "We have to talk about what happened in the Marvel movie." I'm like, "Okay, Mr. Moskowitz."
Petition to release the Epstein files, the White House said would be a hostile act. No, we have no questions about that. But why? Why is it that we're spending so much political
Why did they cut
capital
to black at the end of
to keep this
Sopranos?
list
What's
from
that to
coming
do with
out?
anything?
You think the list should come out? You think we should know the people who dealt with Mr. Epstein, Mr. Farage?
I thought I was coming to a hearing on free speech, not process.
Oh, well, listen, but here's the
And
good...
that sounds like you're discussing process.
No. Do you think the list should come out?
I have no opinion on it. I don't know.
So we have victims that were sexually
I am
abused
not
by
ending up
potentially
like
people in
Bro
power. And we don't know who's on the list.
I'm very happy.
Hold on,
to
Mr.
discuss
Fresh.
that
We
with
don't know
you
who's on the list. We don't know who's on the list. We don't know if the president is or is not. I'm not going to say he is or isn't. I'm just going to say these are weird behaviors. We don't know that there aren't other people in Congress that are on the list. Right? We have no idea. Do you think the list should come out? You think people in power should be held to account for these victims who have been sexually abused and assaulted? You think the list should come out?
I think that I'm very happy to come to a different hearing where you talk about legal process.
Okay.
But
Will the
today-
gentleman yield for a quick question?
I will.
Were you aware that he has already called for the Epstein file to be released? It has been reported that he has called for it to be released.
Oh yeah, right here, just to refresh your memory.
Yeah, but it's,
I happen to have this.
But that's not
How
what
random.
But that is not. Look, you can
Look
ask
how
me
many
if you
people
like
left.
about
Do you agree
social
with
security
yourself?
policy.
Do you agree with
We are
yourself?
here- we are here to discuss free speech.
Hold on, it's awkward for your lunch after this? Do you agree with yourself?
No, it isn't at all.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'm just curious. This committee has jurisdiction over the Department of Justice.
Yeah.
Why have we allowed Comer to cover this up for the last couple of months?
As I said,
why is this committee not
I
taking
said 6 weeks
jurisdiction?
ago that we will have the FBI director in, we will have the attorney general in, and we are doing that.
All right, Faraj, how do you feel about Bimbo in the Peepo file?
You can do whatever you want to do with. I got lots of questions for the FBI director, including the whistleblower who came forward and told him that Adam Schiff leaked classified information.
I think
I
I've
want to ask
taken
him about that
psychic
as well,
damage.
as well as the issues you all want to ask him about. That's why he's coming, so we can ask.
This is a good question. Why didn't Mr. Jordan say, like, order?
As Mr. Faraj just talked about.
Mr.
The
Chairman,
gentleman
I
from
mean,
Virginia.
unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent.
I'd like to enter the political article into the record that Mr. Faraj said the Epstein file should be released.
Without objection. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank
This
you,
is a
Chairman.
job. They get paid 6 figures for this, by the way.
Tools that are being used by Europe and protectionist measures that have major consequences.
It's basically a no-show at this point. Like,
I'm glad to have you all here to get your views on those issues.
You sometimes come in a
Mr.
vote.
Farage, you called the Online Safety Act a borderline dystopian censorship regime. And many
Finally.
agree, including myself, that the law badly overreaches.
Finally,
One of the
we're on
most serious
topic.
criticisms is that it empowers Ofcom to undermine encryption.
Oh my God.
And open
First
the door
time Ofcom
to
mentioned here.
not just government surveillance of posts online and public statements, but private messages, raising alarms not just in the UK, but beyond UK borders. Vice President J.D. Vance has warned this could threaten Americans' privacy
makes
as well.
kindergarten look
Do you
like Parliament.
recognize that this is not just a domestic issue for the UK, but a global one? And if you become Prime Minister, what assurances would you give allies that the UK will not undermine end-to-end privacy standards?
You have my absolute word that a reform government will repeal the Online Safety Act and will go right back, actually, to legislation back to 2010, under which these whole concepts of hate speech have begun to be interpreted in UK law, and we will do that. Do we want to
Okay,
protect
but
kids? This is the big question. Yes, we do. We need
all
to
the people
find
that
ways-
were arrested and charged would still be under that because it's still incitement of
The
violence. you know.
hardware could be part of the solution, but yes, we want to protect.
I don't think they'll. I think they'll repeal it to a certain extent.
You've said Reform UK has access to some of the best tech minds to design alternatives. How do you propose to balance protecting children without scanning private
Copy.
messages or weakening encryption?
And paste ready.
I think, well, as I said,
Burger.
look, I don't have all the
mention.
answers to this, but the British Prime Minister says he has got the answers to this. Well, if it's
Digest
about
me and not
protecting
reform me.
kids, why does the
Deal, Jace.
legislation give Ofcom the most extraordinary and frankly arbitrary powers?
Burger.
And why is there the establishment under
Come on,
the
guys.
Act
Post the
of an
burger.
elite
Post the
police
fucking
force
burger,
unit
chat.
to monitor what is said online? So, it's far better to be honest
Post it.
and say we don't have the perfect solutions than to pretend we have with
Yeah.
legislation that is a sledgehammer that misses the nut.
Thank you.
Mrs.
Mr.
the
Price,
Nut.
the EU's Digital Services Act imposes liability for so-called systemic risks. How does that chill religious or political speech, and do you see conflicts with First Amendment principles?
Yeah,
I love how
that's
me and
correct.
Fake
The
has never else all
systemic
did
risk
10
provision,
exactly.
I think constitutes a form of content
Come
moderation.
on, everyone,
that
keep
they're
the burgers
misrepresenting,
coming.
Frankly, in their letters to you, and where the systemic risk provisions
Keep 'em
talk about,
coming,
in fact,
chat.
damage
Keep
to
'em
what I call
coming.
Civil discourse, and we've already seen prosecutions, including clients of ours, who have been prosecuted for, among other things, praying silently, discussing the differences between Christianity and Islam, tweeting a verse from the Bible. So if these constitute systemic risks to civil discourse, the EU has the power in terms of this content moderation provision to step in.
Damage to
Post
civil
the burger
discourse is
chat.
broad, doesn't it?
Post it.
Absolutely.
Mr. Reid, the EU's Digital Markets Act and the UK's Digital Markets Competition and Consumers Act are sold as pro-competition, but don't compliance costs just burden small app developers?
Burger.
Absolutely.
I heard
the problem
burned
is
as
that
burger.
It's interesting as you talked about how do you do a better job. You asked how do we do a better job to protect children. One of the ways we do it is by empowering parents to be good parents. And one of our deepest concerns is by removing some of the capability of the platforms to curate and provide information to parents about what applications do through a clear, forward interface that they see every day that's useful. It makes it harder to parent, harder to know what apps are on your kid's device, and harder for you to control it. So we absolutely see that not only are there problems with it on encryption, which we agree with you 100%, but we also think it weakens our ability as parents to be in charge of the devices our children are using.
Yeah, these rules don't help
it's
parents,
Burger.
consumers, if you will.
Burger
They
Country.
just shift power from platforms and from
Burger.
parents and from consumers to regulators, correct?
Clip farming, clip war maxing.
Do these regimes create a level playing field for U.S. firms, or do they
Okay, I'm
advantage
locking it
European
again.
competitors at the expense of
I'm
American
locking it again.
innovation?
You can keep posting Burger.
Well, the original thought behind the DMA was that Europe had not been successful in creating their own industry, as was alluded to by several other members of Congress, and
Hamburger.
Congressman Correa noted it as well. Europe's economic potential has slowed while the United States has grown.
Okay, in all seriousness, hardware-based parental controls is what the adult industry is asking for. That's what everyone that is serious about free speech is asking for at this point.
And now, and we think a lot of it comes from the small technology companies that have been creating amazing devices, amazing products, amazing applications that you're all using. And we are disappointed that that there aren't the same opportunities for the U.S. For our EU members.
Thanks, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Okay,
Thank
please
you,
be
Mr.
about
Chairman.
OSA, please, for the love
for
of God.
years, political extremists, including some of our colleagues, have
this
claimed
lady.
without evidence
This is so bad.
that so-called conservative speech is being canceled. But the speech at issue is not conservative political speech.
Go to the hamburger
It's
man,
hate
good friend,
speech,
fucking
including
idiot.
incitement to violence, threats, and harassments of particular people or groups, and lies about almost
Device level
everything
control,
from election
yes.
results to health care. And there's nothing conservative about any of that. So today's hearing appears to be one more attempt by these extremists to claim victimhood, promote falsehoods, and normalize radical ideas, all while attacking
Normalize.
others. Today, our Republican colleagues claim that our European allies pose the biggest threat to Americans' free speech today.
Well, they kind of do.
Seriously?
Yeah.
There's an all-out assault on the First Amendment in the U.S.
Okay, like, that's
but it's
equally
coming
bad.
From inside the House.
But
the
also,
White
it's coming
House,
from outside the
our
house.
executive branch of our own country.
Ugh.
For the past 8
Burgers
months,
are
our Republican
censoring.
colleagues have done nothing but cheer on the administration's un-American attacks. Because the truth is, they're all for free speech, but only if it's the speech they agree with.
She's
And so
not
if you
even
really
wrong.
want to talk about censorship, let's talk about how this administration,
No,
with the
no,
support of our
no,
MAGA colleagues,
Please
has
stop.
tried to strangle speech
Please
and
stop.
ideas that it doesn't agree with.
Stop
when
deflecting.
That speech comes
The
from
OSA is
free
a
press,
serious
college
issue.
campuses, law firms and judges, library books, the Smithsonian museums, responsible investors, scientists, dedicated employees with deep expertise, and
Yeah,
more.
she's not even wrong.
We've seen this White House use
It's just she's
executive
deflecting.
orders,
That's the
threats, and
problem.
intimidation, illegal withholding
Like, all this
of
stuff is
federal
true.
funding, raids
But the OSA is
by
a
masked
problem.
and armed police,
It's now
and
illegal to
even
eat
sending
food.
military troops onto American streets to shut down opposition to this administration's policies.
Like, she's not wrong,
Professor
but
Kay, you are an internationally recognized expert on freedom of expression and have studied the growing assault on free speech and civil society around the world. In your testimony, you said that the situation in the U.S. raises serious alarms. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, well, thank you for the question. Everything that you just mentioned is alarming. The assaults on the press, on universities, on public protest, all of those things, I think, are the kinds of things that historically the United States has fought against. So all of those things are very problematic. And I think that one way to think about them, perhaps, and it's useful in this committee, actually, in the context of this committee, is to think of those things that the Trump administration is doing as a contrast to something like the DSA, right? So the DSA sees a problem, which I think is a problem shared or perceived on both sides of the aisle, which is massive platform power and also the kinds of content that you alluded to. But the DSA doesn't create any new rules that allow either the European Commission or countries to censor. It is a transparency regime. It's a risk assessment regime. It's actually researcher access. It's actually a tool to give us information about what's happening online. That's in just sharp contrast to the kind of issues that we're seeing in this country, which are very much focused on criticism and content.
Yeah, I think my colleague, Ms. Jayapal, talked about the fact that we had a very robust investigation of big tech in prior Congresses, which has kind of been shut down by a new alliance between big tech and the Republican Party. But it is about dealing with the real issues and the very real power that these big tech platforms have, and trying to provide tools for ordinary citizens to fight back against disinformation or harmful content.
They're not coming
Can
back.
you talk a little bit about that?
A lot of them just
absolutely.
stepped out and
I
are
mean,
gone.
If you think about one
Look even behind Professor K, because a lot of people know there's a shit show.
assurance that individuals will be able to challenge, to appeal content moderation decisions. That is not something that is allowed or mandated by law in the United States. One other thing just to mention in this connection, I think Mr. Farage mentioned, and it's really just to highlight how hard some of these questions might be. Mr. Farage has...
There were a lot more people earlier, and they slowly filtered out, both congressmen and women and literal people
to deal
behind them.
with children's access to harmful information.
It was slightly filled.
There's
It was
something
not fully packed,
possibly
but pretty
there,
close.
but it's another form of censorship. I think we should just recognize that restrictions are on the table in the United States, in the UK, elsewhere. I think the Europeans have adopted an approach that makes quite a bit of sense.
Trying to get to as many members as possible. The
Gentlelady's
time has expired. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized. Mr. Frost has to
The
leave.
exact moment he's like, yeah, there might be issues if the EU, the chairman,
Thank
brings
you,
it. I'm pausing really quickly to show you. We'll get back to live in a second. This was not like this at the start. It was almost completely filled. This is such an embarrassment. People are leaving because they know there's a shit show.
Chairman, it's not about Epstein. It has nothing to do with that. And as the chairman so correctly said, the attorney general is going to be here, the FBI director is going to be here, and we can talk about it till the cows come home.
Crazy ass pinstripe suit.
Second thing is, I believe it was you, Mr. Farage,
He's trying
said
too hard to just nice.
COVID changed our world. And in many ways, more than just a biological disease, what it did to us psychologically, governmentally, philosophically, was really bad. And we're still not out of it yet because of what happened then.
Yeah.
We're losing our freedoms. We are losing our freedoms, and it's not because of an American Congress. It's not because of American courts. It's not because of American Republicans, and I'm going to even say it's not because of American Democrats. It is due to bureaucrats in Brussels and in London, and in other places as well. It's wrong. It's un-American. I am unabashedly, and I think we all are here, hopefully, pro-American. We should be protecting our citizens. Instead, we're watching foreign bureaucrats come to our country and try to force United States companies to censor humor, satire, and news they don't like. It's backwards, it's bizarre, it's perverse, and it's weird. That's what we call it in New Jersey. It's just weird.
It's just weird.
It's not good. It's the opposite of everything that the United States of America fought for and stands
for.
And it's a globalist mindset. You know, we can all talk about the issues, but I'm going to keep talking about globalism versus American exceptionalism and individuality. I believe very much, sincerely,
Joyzy ain't no hamburger state. It's a pork roll state.
What's happening in
right in the left.
What's happening in the United States is very much that argument. Individuality, in our case here in the States, Americanism, exceptionalism,
state of
or is it globalism? And like the EU's Digital Service Act and the UK's Online Safety Act are the pinnacle examples, and they are, of how upside down things have gotten in the effort to globalize our society. And that is the ultimate showdown. It is resulting in our losing of our freedom, losing our influence, and the only winner here.
I think it is incitement to violence, Jace.
Russia, China,
in both of those
and others.
instances. Like, it is hate speech
Europe
because
is
of
spending their
protected
time
characteristics
attacking
as well.
American tech companies, dictating how our platforms operate.
Like, we're not talking about, like, you should go punch, like, a Jets fan. We're talking about, like, if you find a transgender woman in a bathroom for women, you should punch them. And we're talking about, like, go to the hotels where the asylum seekers are and go burn them down. Like, those are both protected statuses, at least in the U.S.
Lives, their treasure,
It would
their
not. It
sacred
would
honor.
be potentially considered hate speech.
They wouldn't have to go through this. And we never.
Well, there's a long history of hate speech successfully being moderated in the U.S. until somewhat recently. Like, saying those things would be considered hate speech. And for the longest time, you know, we've reached a pretty good happy medium of essentially identifying that someone who is targeting for violence, inciting violence against a protected class in such a way, we've identified that that's not okay, regardless of the current political climate.
Freedom of speech. We have lost everything. And
Yeah, like,
nothing else
what
matters.
you're talking about, Jace, has become codified as a hate crime because it is a hate crime. And for years in the United States, we have arrested and prosecuted those individuals because they're targeting people based on protected status. And that's one of the few instances in the U.S. of free speech limitations consistently continuing to exist because we identify that when you have speech that is considered a hate crime, it can lead to ongoing violence against protected classes.
Of the debate has told me that the Online Safety Act is a wonderful piece of legislation. You know, right across the spectrum here, you're having your own internal debates about free speech in America, right, healthy, and what this committee is for. I want to make this argument. Yeah, I know these companies are very big and very powerful, many of the tech firms. But, you know, governments talk to each other, yeah? And it needs the American administration and businesses to have an honest conversation. Brussels, you won't get a hearing. They are fundamentally anti-American, frankly.
With all due respect, Jace, in that case, the arresting is the form of censorship in your case. So what you're basically saying is, like, they should not be censored, but they should be punished. Well, on some level, you have to discourage the incitement of violence as a platform because a platform might be held responsible for also allowing hate crimes to be published as well. So you can't have your cake and eat it too on this.
It is cause for proper intergovernmental debate.
I hope that we.
I don't think that's historically true, Jace, because for decades now we've had hate crime laws on the books and they have not impacted free speech.
I'm in a discussion. I see and hear what happens. I watch. My wife has Channel 6 on, which drives me nuts at home, and has nothing to do with the damn stuff that actually happened. And that's the truth.
Guy's so
we
New
have it
Jersey.
already, and I pray to God we don't lose America. Mr. Chairman, indulgence, and I'll shut up. Mr. Price didn't get a chance.
Quickly. Yes, sir. You talked about putting pressure on, and I agree that Brussels is a cold house for free speech. But a lot of the regulations actually happening in my own country, in Ireland, in Dublin, where a lot of the tech companies are headquartered, their European headquarters. And it's the Irish Media Commission, or Commission Naman in the Irish language, which is the ground zero, really, for a lot of this regulation. And here's where I think the U.S. can do
On the hate crime stuff, let me just say really quickly before we listen to Mr. Price.
Ireland and the United States, is to put pressure on the Irish government
For a lot of hate crimes, we're not talking about the creation of art. We're talking about me coming into your house, me coming into a public square and saying someone should punch you, right? We're not talking about art. We're not talking about things like, say, you know, difficult, complicated depictions of things in film and literature, things like that. We're talking about me going on Twitter and saying something like, you should go into a bathroom and, like, punch anyone that is, like, a transgender woman, right? Like, in a case like that, we have a very long history of prosecuting for that in the United States with limitations on actually impacting free speech because it's understood that the inciting speech is hateful in nature and doesn't necessarily pass merit for First Amendment protections.
Could we ask him if he would be willing to stay for a little?
Totally up to
Libby's
the witness,
been
but,
pulling some
if
stuff
the
from
witness has to go
SB 20
somewhere, I
by the way.
understand. We were glad that he came. We were glad that we had a chance to visit with him in Europe. So you could have went on that trip and had a chance to interact with him.
I wasn't invited, but next time.
Oh, you were
please
definitely
invite me.
invited. Everyone was invited from the Democrat side. The whole committee was invited. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Georgia for questions. And Mr. Farage, if you can stay longer, we would definitely welcome that.
When I chaired this event in the Palace of Westminster, we had an hour for it because time was very tight, and that was perhaps the source of a slight disagreement Mr. Raskin and I had.
A little bit of confusion on that.
We would have given this.
Each side got an hour, but the whole thing was limited to an hour.
What do you mean by that, little Siberian bear?
The instructions. This we've given 3 hours, and I apologize, but no, I can't stay longer.
Okay.
I could send the Constitution down to the White House for the president to read it
The
while he
gentleman
waits
is not
for you.
recognized. The gentlelady from Georgia has 5 minutes to ask her questions while Mr. Farage is still here, and then he will leave when he has to leave.
I'll
Thank
take
you,
a
Mr.
5.
Chair, and thank you to our witnesses today.
The Klan can have a parade. The Klan cannot say, let's lynch black
Definitely
people.
under
Yes.
attack. Words are very powerful
why the Klan
tools, as
changed.
you've heard them being used
Had a national
here
director.
in this hearing. And this administration has gone out of their way to retaliate against our students, news agencies, and others who express views that don't align with their extreme agenda. By using lawsuits, eliminating funding, and even going so far as to send out a memo with a list of restricted words that can't even be used. The actions of this administration have been ruled against in court time and time again by judges from both parties on a basis of abusing our constitutional rights. From freezing funding for colleges because they do not bend to this administration's will, to removing programs that are designed to expand student understanding and access in education, which I'd like to add, increases future opportunities for our Republican constituents as well, and using federal investigation powers to retaliate. We are watching the First Amendment be manipulated in ways that this nation hoped that
I would also argue, just to be clear, that I think it's the correct ruling that the Klan can have a parade, but not say let's lynch black people. Like, that deciding line is important both for the free speech protections of all of us, but also identifying the importance of noting that hate crimes must continue to be on the books, as in something that can be prosecuted, right? You can march, but you cannot call for violence.
claimed that the FTC was using this investigation as a retaliation against the watchdog group for claims against a prominent Trump supporter. A clear violation
I don't wanna
of
speak over
First
her, so I'll just
Amendment
say this really
protections, and the cases, they just go on and on and on. U.S. District Judge McFadden, a Trump appointee, ordered that the Associated Press's access to the White House press be reinstated, ruling that denying their access because of differing viewpoints.
I think as a leftist, the Klan shouldn't march, period. They should be deplatformed. But if we're talking about legal First Amendment protections, then that's a different matter.
First Amendment in other parts of the world, they need to start
Legal
right here
versus
in
pressuring,
our
socially and
administration.
culturally.
The Constitution is the foundation of this country. It is not meant to be trampled on for political or for business advantage. When you love something, you want to protect it, and you want to do what's best for it. You want to improve it. This means people will speak out and disagree on actions taken in their country and offer critiques of our leaders and, yes, the politicians. That's a constitutionally protected right. If the First Amendment is our guardrail, then this administration is truly trying to push us off the road. This government should be strong enough to accept any criticism without violating people's rights and offending the man in the White House. Professor Kay, I have a question, just one question for you. Based on what you've seen since this January, if our colleagues in the majority continue to pretend that our First Amendment rights are not
Yeah, I
under
do agree,
attack
Little
here
Siberian
at
Bear.
home,
I do.
what could this
They
mean
are
for
going
our country within the next 3 years?
Thank you for that question. I think that as we look at the current moment and the current situation for our media, for our universities, for people's access to information generally,
Agreed,
particularly
fakist.
access to health information,
It's gonna get
I
way
think
moist.
It portends really very problematic and dark days ahead. Will we be able to have access to information that makes us informed parents or informed citizens, able to make voting decisions? I think that's the kind of future that
I gotta get my water.
we should expect if we don't recognize this situation. And I think that
Let me get
the
some water.
tenor of the conversation could at least recognize that there are violations of fundamental rights to freedom of expression by this government right now. At least recognize it. I know that Democrats in the last 5 years called out the Biden administration from time to time when it did things that it thought was inconsistent with free speech values. I think having that kind of honest discussion and then some real constraint is where the committee should be heading.
Thank you so much. I encourage
Yeah,
everyone
I agree.
that sees nothing wrong with this administration's
I got you a
retaliatory
little Siberian
attacks
beer.
on expressions
I
of
get
the
it.
First
It's all
Amendment
good.
to consider just how much you are willing to give up to appease this man in the White House. At this time, I'd like to yield the remainder of my time to our ranking member.
There's no time left to yield. I think the gentlelady yields back. I do have to run to another commitment. I will be back in 20 minutes. We will have Mr. Knott take over as chair. Mr. Farage, if you have to leave, I look forward to visiting with you sometime later, hopefully.
I do, but thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony.
Could I just ask you to stay for one more, Mr. Farage?
The gentleman from Alabama is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr.
He's
Chairman.
gotta go
Mr.
poop.
Farage, I enjoyed Milwaukee at the Harley-Davidson plant with you. That was a great evening.
He gotta go poop.
Question
Ranking
for
Nemo more
Mr. Price or
like-
Mr. Farage. One requirement for speech to be censored as a false communication offense under the OSA is that speech must cause non-trivial psychological or physical harm. What is non-trivial psychological harm?
I honestly don't know. And that's the problem with this legislation. It's so
It should have been
open-ended.
asked in the
It can
first
mean
20
anything.
fucking minutes.
It leaves this entirely in the hands of local police forces to make their decisions. And the other disturbing element of this is that much within this act can be changed on a whim by a government minister, or at the other end, it can be interpreted by Ofcom in ways that it sees fit. You know, this is not good legislation. It's totally open-ended. It could literally mean whatever you want it to mean.
And local law enforcement, I guess, can make that decision on who they decide to prosecute and who they do not. Have we seen it tend
hours
one way or
in
the other?
now.
I know we've talked about a couple of cases in here.
almost
Are
1
there
o'clock.
certain people being targeted, you think, with OSA?
Well, that's the fear, isn't it? The fear is that certain communities will be acted upon more harshly than other communities. That creates the impression of a two-tier country. That then breaks down trust in law and order, the democratic system, and everything else. I thought what was interesting overnight was that the boss, Samart Rowley, the boss of the Metropolitan Police, has said, look, we arrested this guy at Heathrow because we had to under the law, but they've thrown it back to the government to say, come on, can you just define more clearly what you want this legislation to mean? And that's why I think it's rotten legislation. It impacts us in ways that we can't yet foresee. It impacts potentially Americans and American businesses, and it needs to be gotten rid of, and we need to start again.
So, Mr. Price, talking about affecting American businesses, I guess Europe's 440 million people, the U.S. is 300 million people. How do these companies, what do you see down the road for these platforms, these social media platforms, these companies that feel like they have to try and comply if they're going to do business in Europe? If, in fact, we don't repeal this OSA thing, which I hope Mr. Farage is able to do that with his leadership at some point in the near future. So how does this play out for our companies, Mr. Price, and for free speech in Europe in general?
Well, on the corporate side, they're facing a really complicated piece of legislation, and as Mr. Farage outlined, with the provisions that are confusing in the Online Safety Act in the United Kingdom, there are similarly extremely confusing provisions in the Digital Services Act. So the mindset has to be one normally of compliance. One company has stood up to this whole regime and is challenging it at every level, and that's X. I hope others join and do the same, because
Not the Elon
the European
Glaze.
Commission, though, really has been quite threatening. You'll recall the Thierry Breton letter, of course, about the Elon Musk's interview with then candidate President Trump. And you'll also see that other members of the Commission have made threatening remarks against companies as well on these so-called voluntary codes of conduct. When X and Google left one of the codes of conduct, a European commissioner said, well, of course they are voluntary, but we note that you've left them and we'll still hold you on the
Unfortunately, I feel
obligations."
like
And you have
they're starting to discuss the basics of OSA, like they started about 30 minutes ago. The basics of OSA and like the impacts, the overall stuff that should have been hours ago, but they're posturing so much about fucking Trump and like that shit on both sides.
So for some of these companies,
it's embarrassing.
that's pretty tremendous fine.
Absolutely, yeah, of turnover.
Farage looks level-headed because like the average person thinks OSA is ridiculous.
Almost like people could claim that they were offended or hurt.
And he
you
knows
hurt
that.
their feelings, and then all of a sudden you're.
That's why he's anti-OSA, because he's a populist candidate. He's a populist politician. He knows it's popular, just like it.
We should be allowed to cause offence.
And that
I should
happens
be able
quite
to
often,
offend
right?
you. You should be able to offend me. And provided we know what the limits are, and the limits are.
You get pretty mad at one Georgia politician, though. I'll tell you what.
Then we have to get back to You know,
I don't know if
a
he
much
would keep
freer
that
way of living.
when
And
he's
if people
in
say rude
charge.
things and we don't like them, well, we just
Getting
ignore them.
dressed down by an American politician like that.
Yes, that was pretty offensive.
Well, I remember the Russia hoax very, very well. We had shades of it earlier on this morning, but,
That's what I was thinking.
but not much more than that, I'm pleased to say.
Well, thank you, and Mr.
I gotta say, little Siberian Bear, there has been nothing of value really said in this whole
Farage,
entire
you can
thing.
blame it on me. One more. Oh, you're avoiding me.
Mr. Farage, thank you. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Goldman.
Like, this has
Sorry
been
to
a
see
bit
you
of a
leave,
joke.
Mr. Farage. I actually had much that we agree upon and was looking forward to your testimony because it's very nice and refreshing to hear from my GOP colleagues that they are worried about authoritarianism. Mr. Biggs and Mr. McClintock both said that earlier. And I imagine, given what's going on in this country, when the president is sending the military into American cities, is weaponizing the Department of Justice to investigate his enemies, requiring loyalty oaths from all federal workers at risk of otherwise being fired, the list goes on and on. It is reassuring to hear that the Republicans who have remained stone silent about Trump's authoritarian takeover of our government here are actually concerned about authoritarianism. And I found it really heartening that Mr. Van Drew said, and I quote, "If we lose our First Amendment rights, we lose everything." Now, in his opening statement, Mr. Farage said, quote, "When the government starts regulating speech, it is rarely those that agree with the government who find themselves in court." And Mr. Farage, I'll ask you the question, is that similar to your concern about suppressing speech that disagrees with the government? Oh, Mr. Farage has left. Well, Mr. Raskin, I will, then maybe just you can stand in for Mr. Farage for a minute here. I know you are a champion of free speech. I'm not sure it's the same free speech that Mr. Farage is supporting, but if there's concern about the government regulating
Look,
speech,
obviously Farage is a bit of a little jerk, but this is
rarely those that agree with the
This is
government
so
who find
ridiculous.
themselves in court. Farage and all of our Republican colleagues would be very, very concerned if a administration here in the United States was investigating criminally individuals who made the colossal mistake of speaking out against the president. That would be a clear violation of Mr. Farage's principle. Is that right?
No, it'd be cool.
He was talking about the importance of political dissent, and this is a test.
And do you think those two are going to jerk each other off when this is done? Because I think this was such a cool thing to do.
For people who are the targets of government repression, even if we don't agree with what they're saying. A great example of that is our colleague, Congresswoman MacGyver from New Jersey. I would hope that in a comparable circumstance, I would stand up for a Republican colleague who tries to exercise his or her oversight rights by going to a government facility on a prearranged visit and then gets caught up in the chaos and confusion outside, and they want to send her to jail for 30 years. I did stand up for our colleague from New York, I'm spacing his name.
I like that email.
Mr. Santos, because they wanted to expel him without his having a conviction or an ethics process. And I said that wasn't fair. So I think I passed a micro test there. I would hope some of our colleagues would say, no, don't prosecute our colleagues just for doing their jobs.
Well, let's talk about that, because that is exactly what this Department of Justice is doing.
What does this have to do with the fucking thing? Okay, yeah, all this stuff is bad. We're talking about the OSA. We're talking about, these European laws impacting us. That is very important. And this grandstanding, who is this for? Is this to jerk each other off in front of, I don't know, fucking Politico later?
Schiff, who led the first impeachment of Donald Trump, is under investigation by the Department of Justice. New York State Attorney General Letitia James, who filed a lawsuit against Donald Trump and his business. She is now under investigation. Miles Taylor, who literally did only The only thing that he
Click,
did
eat
was
someone
write
tempting.
op-ed and a book criticizing the President of the United States. He is under criminal investigation.
Tempting.
Chris Krebs,
Can't believe it's been 4
offense,
hours.
I think, was to say that the 2020 election was the most secure ever. He is under investigation. John Bolton, who has criticized the president, gets his house raided.
Obviously, it's important that there's a lot of violations of like civil liberties and like free speech stuff going on because of the Trump administration, but this was not supposed to be about that. This was supposed to very specifically be about the relationship between these European laws and the U.S., and it would have been very nice for these congressmen and these congresswomen to take that issue seriously.
Farage and every single one of my Republican colleagues speak out in favor of the First Amendment.
Okay, I'm going to see the next speaker. We'll see what the next speaker says.
And I yield back.
Thank you, sir.
And then
The
I'll
chair now
decide whether we're
recognizes
going to
the
drop or
gentlelady
not.
from Wyoming.
Benjamin Franklin said
really
over
getting buried there.
270 years ago, freedom of speech is a principal pillar of a free government. When this support is taken away, the constitution of a free society is dissolved and tyranny is erected on its ruins.
Erected.
An evil magistrate entrusted with power to punish for words would be armed with a weapon the most destructive and terrible. Under pretense
Yeah,
of
right,
pruning
Sarah.
off the exuberant branches, he would be apt to destroy the tree. Mr. Farage talked in his opening statement that noted that Europe's regulatory regime risks exporting restrictive standards that could violate Americans' constitutional rights. So I'd like to expose that and discuss that a little bit further. He noted that the oh-so-benignly titled Online Safety Act exemplified this regulatory model. The OSA is marketed as a measure to protect children online, but it is clearly being used as a means to actually impose government-backed censorship, especially speech which is critical of government policy. As an egregious example, we have learned that the OSA has been used against Katie Lamb, MP for Weald of Kent, to block videos of her speeches made in Parliament critical of the fallout from the country's immigration policies. Mr. Price, are you familiar with the circumstance where actual speeches in Parliament or other public figures, their speeches are being censored by
Republican,
the
by the way.
government under this claim
Blinging even more than
of
she's on topic.
protecting minors or protecting people from hearing this speech?
Still partisan,
I'm
unfortunately.
familiar with censorship of public protests that's already happened in the United Kingdom. The Online Safety Act has placed blocks on those to protect children. That's the claim, but it has prevented adults from accessing it as well.
So the Times has also reported that using the Communications Act of 2003 and the Malicious Communications Act of 1988, there have been 37 police forces have made over 12,000 arrests in 2023 alone, which is the equivalent of 33 a day, all in relation to social media posts. Are you familiar with that information, Mr. Price?
I am, yes.
Okay. In July, the House of Commons Science, Innovation, and Technology Committee released a report indicating that the OSA was merely a first step, is the way that they have described this. In other words, they are planning to do even more to address what they describe as online harm. Have you heard that as well?
I have, yes.
Well, and I think that there's something that just happened this week, and a few of the members have referenced it, but it involved the Irish comedian and writer Graham Lincoln, who was arrested in Britain, apparently for social media posts about transgender issues. Did you hear of this circumstance?
Yes, I did. I know Graham personally.
Okay, and according to his Substack
He's your buddy?
article, the trouble actually began when he was in America. He was at the airport in Arizona seeking to fly back to Europe. Was told that he did not have a seat, was put on a later flight, and when he arrived at Heathrow, he was met by 5 armed police officers. Are police officers in England typically armed?
They're not, no.
So did you find it strange that he would be met by 5 armed police officers?
At airports, counterterrorism police are usually armed, and or there's a special wing of the Metropolitan Police that has armed support unit.
So is he considered a terrorist?
I'm not clear what provision he was Is he a terrorist? Of legislation, but there is a power in the Terrorism Act to arrest people at airports and seize their devices.
Sure. Was he identified as a terrorist because of his online posts?
It's not clear yet if he was arrested under that provision, but it has very wide-ranging powers, and it is used on occasion to detain people at ports.
Okay. I understand that, and that probably is more of a frightening answer than I expected, which is that they've used the power that is typically reserved for terrorists or people who are of grave risk to the country to arrest Mr. Lenhin at the airport because of his Twitter posts. Is that right?
It's not clear if they use it yet, but that is a power that they frequently, that is used to seize people's devices at airports.
Can you describe more of what happened with this incident involving Mr. Lenhin? Do you have the familiarity with the facts?
I've read his statement, yes.
Okay, and could you please explain what happened?
It appears that he was detained on arrival in Heathrow and then arrested, searched, subjected to a long series of questions, most of which revolved around his beliefs on gender ideology and transgender issues. Some of the questions from the police, according to Mr. Lenhin, were extremely ideological in nature, and they talked about people who are assigned a gender at birth, which, as he pointed out himself, is activist language that the police should not be using.
So he also claims that his bail conditions one of the conditions was that he could no longer use X. Is this a tactic you have seen or heard of being used before?
Yes, we've seen extraordinary bail conditions, even placed on clients of our own. We had a client, Pastor Dia Moodley, who was given a bail condition that he was not allowed to preach about the differences between Christianity and Islam on the basis of that he would be bailed. So we have seen bizarre and wide-ranging bail conditions set on people before under speech offenses.
Time's expired.
Okay, thank you.
The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from North Carolina.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the witnesses for your testimony and for your patience. It's been a long hearing. I think it's very timely that we're discussing threats to freedom of speech and innovation in this committee.
1 second, chat.
I do wish we were talking about what's going on in this country right now, but I don't always get what I wish for. Freedom of speech in this country is under threat. There is no question about it. And we haven't talked about this much, so I'm going to focus on it. The essential American ideal of innovation is also under threat, and it's enshrined in our Constitution, and it's being ignored. The gravest threats to speech and innovation are coming not from our democratic European allies, but from the authoritarian and unconstitutional actions of the Trump administration. The Trump administration has embarked on a coordinated crackdown of speech on universities across the country. I represent more than 5 universities in the Research Triangle area. I've seen it. The administration illegally froze billions of dollars in federal research grants, affecting not just people's health and safety, which is what they were for in the first place, but the economies of places like North Carolina. They forced the resignation of university presidents they don't like, and they threatened to strip universities of
I think one of the reasons why a lot of folks left is also because there was a presser about the Epstein files that were released, which is leading to a larger call, bipartisan in nature, even Marjorie Taylor Greene is part of it, to get the full release of the files.
Infant mortality.
But it's not the only reason why this has been so many people have left.
Academic programs and student admissions. Professor Kay, how have the Trump administration's attacks on our nation's preeminent research universities harmed the ability to innovate?
I'll let Kay's answer go, and then we're done.
Excellent question. and we've seen it across the board, these attacks on universities. And if we think about universities, and there is a connection here to freedom of speech, if we think of our universities as the principal engine for the generation of knowledge and
there's only about like 2.1 million of us. I think there's more of us in the U.S. because trans rights are so repressed, but still.
You described. And it goes after them not only by withholding grants that have already been awarded. It's also going after them in the context of seeking to shape what the research is, what's actually being taught in the classroom. Those are,
Yeah, I agree
think,
with
very
equality.
significant interferences with the potential.
Remember, as LGB rights continue
Now
to increase.
get to tech issues.
Oh, we're
kind
gonna
of underlying what's going on.
we're gonna see this. Hi, Alien King.
This hearing is supposed to be about Europe's threat to big tech companies. But I'd like you to speak about the threat of big tech companies and the AI models that they're creating on intellectual property rights, many of which are protected more strongly in Europe.
I'm sorry, but we're not. That was looking very interesting, and I'm done. Okay. I want to stress really quickly, guys. First of all, they added Dr. K was added very late. I think what likely happened is I'm not gonna lie, chat. Originally, the witnesses were Farage, Top, Price, and Morgan Reed, and I think I think Democrats demanded someone that's basically be more left-leaning, more liberal on the panel. Because originally, Kay was not a witness here. They added him very late. So I think, first of all, that was going on behind the scenes because the Democrats probably wanted someone to kind of reinforce their point. Second of all, I want to stress this. This hearing was called Europe's Threat to American Speech and Innovation. The House Judiciary Committee will hold a hearing on Wednesday, September 3rd. The hearing will examine European threats to American free speech and innovation. It will highlight how European online censorship laws, specifically the UK's Online Safety Act and the EU's Digital Services Act, threaten Americans' right to speak freely online in the United States. Additionally, it will explain how the UK's Digital Markets Competition and Consumers Act and the EU's Digital Markets Act target American companies and hurt innovation. I don't know, guys, but I got the feeling that we didn't really see any of that. We did get a little bit of crumbs about this, a little bit of conversation. A lot of it was extremely biased towards the right-wing panelists and politicians, the more right-leaning ones, particularly Farage. And it really, and as well as the Republican, Judiciary Committee members. But the other thing was that this was very frustrating because this felt like an opportunity for Democrats to say, the OSA is bad. What's going on with the EU is bad. But let's also look at what Trump's doing. They could have done that. But instead, so much of this was, you think the OSA is bad? Well, Trump's bad. And don't attack our European allies. And it's on some level, it needs to be understood here. Yes, do not get me wrong. I was literally, while we were going through the last 30, 40 minutes, I was looking at the page of the lawyer in the 4chan Kiwi Farms lawsuit against Ofcom, and he's retweeting stuff from the one Great Britain News folks, and he's talking about how Graham Lennon is this sort of free speech warrior, stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, there is this element to which the folks that are fighting very hard against the OSA and taking this focus of American companies and American consumers' free speech liberties are being purposefully silenced by Europeans. There is a right-wing slant in that party. Or rather, there's a lot of right-wingers taking that stance and trying to argue that stance to also get people to agree to other right-wing beliefs. Hey, maybe saying punch a trans woman is not a bad idea. That's sort of a thing I am very skeptical of. In the same way that I do honestly agree that Farage is hanging out over here because he's trying to back home look like a populist candidate who's going to repeal the OSA, get people who are maybe not usually part of the right wing to back him. It's very clear that Farage is trying to get favor of Elon Musk. It did come up during that actual hearing that Elon is a man who under X, with X is very resistant to OSA, is very resistant to what's going on with DSA, is very resistant to these sort of censorship measures, and he probably is looking a little bit for a handout for when he tries to run for prime minister. A parliament he's trying to run for prime minister of the United Kingdom. But that hearing was such a shit show. This could have been an opportunity to really have a proper conversation on what is the OSA? What is the Digital Services Act? What is the Digital Media Competition Consumers Act? What is the Digital Markets Act? What should Americans know? What potential risks do they have? Democratic politicians could have steered the ship and provided an alternate interpretation opinion of things that prevented it from looking like the right are the only ones that actually care about the OSA, and also provided this counterbalance, basically saying the OSA is bad, we should not have stuff like that in the US, but also what Trump is doing is censorious as well. Like, they could have done that. And I feel like I would say the Democrats dropped the ball, but there is no ball the Democrats wanted to hold to begin with. The Democrats and the Republicans, deep down, are both very much on the same page that they do want to censor significant portions of the internet because it does give both parties a significant amount of control over the speech of Americans and, more specifically, the information that they get access to. For Democrats and Republicans alike, the censorship of the internet, the closure of the free and open internet, is beneficial because it does allow both parties to limit information from wild card sources and force people to rely on politicians and their sort of party apparatus news sources to get information. Think of what the Democrats are doing with Chorus, right? Think of what the Republicans have been doing for years with their own right-wing political apparatus, their own sort of like fake news operations. In a lot of ways, what is happening is that Republicans will cry foul about the OSA, but then go ahead and vote for all those sorts of bills you constantly hear us sound the alarm on, saying, hey, if this bill passes, it's going to destroy free speech rights, the rights of sex workers, the rights of adult content creators. It's going to, potentially increase obscenity laws. And, it's going to lead to things like Texas SB 20 increasing in laws like that, or policies, federal policies like that, increasing law enforcement, becoming more censorious through, arresting you for, things that you should have a free speech right to have, like adult content of fictional characters that because they're anime characters, someone thinks there's all this subjective interpretation of anime characters. It's just a situation where it's this hearing, while I was going in not expecting a lot, I thought it was going to be a little bit of a mess. I thought at least the Democrats would take some concerns over OSA and DSA seriously. And I was hoping at least that there would be some sort of productive conversation. And so from the jump, I was already really upset with how Raskin handled things. And I was really upset with the fact that Democrats only seemed to be saying, well, let's try to poke an eye into Trump. And then obviously, I don't think I even need to go into the fact how fucking infuriating it is to see so many Republicans and conservatives in that hearing just straight up lie. Not a surprise that everyone avoided saying the literal tweets that got Linehan arrested. Why? Because they were things that if you just randomly told a random person, they would understand why he got arrested, okay? You can't be like this deranged divorced dad who's sitting there if you're in the bathroom and you see a transgender woman, you should punch her. You just can't say that. There's a reason why everyone there did not utter the literal tweet that likely got him arrested, okay? There's a reason why they failed to state that. And this is exactly what I was talking about yesterday, where it's like the Rev says Desus syndrome, right? Phenomenon. It's they will say 85% stuff you agree with or 85% stuff that makes sense, but then there's 15% bullshit, 15%, information omitted, 15% that otherwise would kind of just it's just lies or whatever. And that 15% brings them into the red zone. It brings them into an area where they're able to convert you over to whatever narrative they have because they're spouting bullshit and you believe the other 85% because it might in fact be based on fact. Yeah. Graham Lennon did just tweet some things, but he tweeted some things that are pretty bigoted, okay, and could in fact incite violence, and it is very possible that someone would punch a trans woman in a bathroom and say, I read a Graham Lennon tweet and that inspired me to do it. This is a situation where there's a lot of obfuscating, manipulation, trying to paint other people as the bad guys and me as the good guys, and I think it really stresses a point that I want to drive home here, right now, which is this. The politicians on a high level are not coming to save you. They don't care. Every single politician in that room didn't really seem to care that deeply about this issue impacting people that didn't personally agree with them in some shape or form. It didn't seem, everything from Farage was about his buddies and friends. Everything from the Democrats was about, Trump. Everything from the Republicans was about, Biden, Sleepy Joe. And it's really embarrassing. These politicians are not going to come to save you. So I hope folks understand that if we do start seeing more more censorious bills hit Congress that are trying to limit our free speech rights or increase the definition of obscenity to limit our access to certain kinds of content, whether it's adult content, queer content, whatever kind of legal, kind of illustrations, images, whatever. I think it's really important for folks to identify that our main goal is going to be to blow the fuck up their phones, as in keep calling them, not literally bomb them. I can't believe I have to say this, but after everything that's happened, I have to. Our job is going to be to keep that call line busy, constantly blowing up the phone. Call, pressuring, sending voicemails showing we do not like the idea of censoring content. Because it's very clear that these politicians left to their own devices are going to continue to try to score points with their side and make themselves look good. And then the moment that the more technical conversations enter the picture, they all walk out of the convention. I mean, the hearing. These people do not care about how OSA affects you. They don't care about how OSA affects adult content creators. They don't care about how it affects sex workers. They don't care about how it affects international free speech. All they care about is basically whether they can go back to their constituents and said, I really showed it to that Republican, or I really showed it to that Democrat piece of shit. They don't care about anything else. They don't care. They don't care about this issue. They don't care about us. So you're going to, unfortunately, if these laws start to continue to appear in advance, we're going to have to call them and make it clear to them that they have to care, because we are going to keep calling them, and we're 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 going to keep calling them, because they don't care about us. They don't. They don't care about you. They really don't. They only care about their ability to keep making that six-figure no-show job. It's insanely depressing. That was an insanely depressing experience. Real 2 out of 10 type shit. Ugh. Just Spider-Man pointing out at how each side gets censored for right or wrong reasons instead of focusing on the censorship itself. 100% agreed. That was an awful experience. That was an awful experience. There's more outrage about policing hate speech than free speech in there. I just want to draw fictional women, princess carrying other fictional women. This sucks. I hope it really shows. Our politicians don't care about us. They don't care about us. They care more about making it look like they stuck it to Trump, or like they stuck it to the Democrats or whatever. Or they're resisting Biden, who's not even in office, who is like a senile old fuck, than they do care about like you and me. In any shape. They don't give a fuck about you and I. We're just warm bodies that can vote for them. That's it. Do you think there's a certain degree of conformism around free speech and similar issues that causes many in online left circles to avoid meaningful discussion around this extremely important issue? I'm going to be honest. I think a lot of it is that you get yelled at and bullied if you say, like, maybe we should have more expansive understandings of free speech to protect adult content. And you get yelled at and bullied if you say that, like, maybe certain forms of adult content that are already legal in the U.S. to begin with shouldn't be limited and deplatformed. Like, people are going to yell at you. Like, I'm going to be fully honest with you guys. I had always, for a very long time, for a number of years now, had mixed feelings about lolly show content. Like, I just simply felt like that content, like, not for me, have potential concerns about how it could theoretically, you know, enable or normalize pedophilia. But I also generally felt like, you know, it's just, you know, basically it's just artwork created by adults for other adults, and there's usually more complexity into motivation for accessing that content. Like, a lot of lolly show interest is not really like about like whether bodies are young. It's kind of like acting out an age play fantasy that's self-insertive. That's often what it's about, and it often has very little to do with like much else further than that for a significant portion of people that are actually engaging in that content. It varies. Either way, and regardless, they're cartoons, right? And for a very long time, it was becoming more and more obvious to me that like maybe defending that kind of content from payment processor censorship was important. But I really felt like I could not say that out loud because I would get fucking like completely like destroyed for arguing that point, even though it increasingly was starting to feel the case for me. Now, obviously, because of my personal issues with some aspects of Lolly's show, it motivated me to take a more negative stance towards it when, for example, I read about Via Lore. But sitting down and talking to more folks that access that content, or rather talking to more folks that are advocates for like seeing it as not necessarily normalizing negative things in society, reading more research about it, and also really more than anything, just generally feeling that on the level of payment processor stuff, like the moment that you start allowing the censorship of that kind of adult content, even though it is in most parts of the US, for example, still legal content, the moment that you open the door for the censorship of that content, it tends to empower pay pros because it gives them the precedent to censor content instead of just simply handle transactions. Like a mixture of those things together made me start to realize, okay, like I think for the good of this issue, I should finally accept this feeling that I was kind of considering for the longest time anyway, and just come out and say, look, like if you want to protect your right to the kind of content that you want to access, you might need to hold your nose and say, hey, this content is legal in the United States, say for Texas, and you should understand that the moment that you give payment processors the right to censor that legal artwork, like you're giving them the right to censor other artwork. Like they are purposely going to try to get you to agree to that censorship in order to try to increase their control over all forms of speech on the internet, and all forms of artwork and all forms of adult artwork. So I would say I think in online left circles, like I think a lot of folks know deep down, like the very like free speech absolutist folks have some good points, but we just can't say it because people will yell at us. And at this point, like, I don't care. Like, I care more about this issue and, like, doing the right thing than I do care about, like, whether a bunch of people on the internet that were going to dislike me anyway like me or not. Like, it's very clear to me, and I think it's dawning on a lot of people on the left, which is why I came out about feeling this way. I think it's clear to me and a lot of other people that we did kind of drop the ball by not having a more expansive understanding of payment processor censorship as beginning with content that is often very hard to defend, even if legal. And then it comes for, you know, the rest of the content next. And so I think a lot of us realized like we're kind of making up for lost time, maybe a little bit too late. But I think it's very obvious to me that a lot of other folks feel this way. I talk to a lot of other folks that do VA work, that do adult content creation, that do advocacy issues, and we all kind of generally have felt this way, but felt really nervous about saying it out loud because we knew what would happen. Now, what has happened is people are starting to finally realize that, yes, like it comes for that content first, and there is a certain level to which we have to protect like creators that do content maybe we don't like, but it's still legal. And it's given us an opportunity to really just wedge that issue. Like, and make it clear. I think also the fact that like folks like myself are saying like, no, actually, like you need to understand like this is not a matter of endorsing certain content, it's a matter of principle, has also opened the door to people understanding a more expansive protection of free speech is urgent right now, because they understand that like the barbarians are at the gates. You know, they understand now that like they see the enemies are at the gates. This is not like the guessing game. I hate to make a Harry Potter reference, but it's like, it is actually a good example because, you know, it's like some aspect that Rowling did understand before she went fucking insane. Like so much about Harry Potter that actually translates to understanding fascism, right, is the fact that like there's that whole entire segment in the first couple books where like everyone is blind to the fact that Voldemort's coming back because they don't want to deal with like the rising fascism of Voldemort. And then finally the Ministry of Magic realizes like they can't lie to themselves anymore. Like this is a problem. They can't just like kind of say like everything's okay. But they're kind of caught up trying to make up for lost time as like Voldemort gradually controls like the governing body of the wizarding world in the UK. I hate to make a Harry Potter reference, but it is a very astute one because it is kind of what happened here. And I always thought as a young age, like as much as Rowling sucks dog shit, truly sucks dog shit, like that whole entire storyline for a lot of people probably introduced them to the idea that governments can like struggle and fail to maintain fascism, because it is supposed to be an allegory for World War II. Like it's supposed to be an allegory for like the rise of Hitler. And I think we learned a lot here today. We learned that no one is talking taking OSA seriously here and that we only care about the burger. We also learned that tomorrow is September 4th, Silksong release day, the day known the futuristic book day. I think that's a good reason to end the stream. Literal existential threat to our freedoms and more concerned about clip farming. Local and micro-political scene, politics scenes and volunteer opportunities. Helping your neighbors is way better convincing them than actually debating them. Agreed. I feel like the online left is just its own micro-genre for some reason, like left can mean anything, but I thought left means ally to sex workers, politically abandoned, LGBTQIA, etc. No idea why they are quite now. Frankly, I don't like the term Puritans because it obscures the root of the issue and deflects it into ageism and hatred of the youth. If you give a mouse a cookie by Laura Numeroff and Felicia Bond, that's the fundamentals of my politics. People you disagree with are capable of making good points. I don't see us coming back to normal. We need to codify online privacy as a right. Like, the data theft is only allowed because it's not seen as something we should control and have to give limited consent for. I'm curious what you mean by data theft. Who's up thieving their data? I'm gonna do a quick news sweep to see if there's like anything of relevant import that's happened over like since that, because like we're kind of midday. I will say that Patreon is going to get back to me today about some further information about what's going on with their own approach to Texas SB 20. But whether they will give me an on-the-record statement or not, I don't know yet. But I just wanted to flag that like that is something at least that's coming. It's something that is on the way. Looking to see if there's anything else about SB20 worth paying attention to. Not really seeing a lot right now. I'm still hoping more folks get back to me about how libraries are handling it. But I don't know. I've heard some libraries haven't made any steps, and it's really hard to say for sure, you know. Texas Anime Library. Okay. But yeah, I'm doing a little bit of quick news sweep before we wrap up for the day. I'm not really seeing anything new right now. All right. Yeah, I'm not really seeing much new. I want to remind you guys, as I've mentioned before, I really want to stress it again. Let's see. There might be one news update, question mark. Let me see, question mark. There is something. Patricia Hernandez did something for Polygon yesterday. Steam's Visa MasterCard and censorship fiasco just keeps deteriorating. We got a pretty good write-up there, which is pretty exciting to see. I'm gonna go share it. I'm not gonna sit down and read through it quite yet, but I'm really glad Patricia Hernandez has stayed on top of it. Patricia's done a good job staying on top of it. She's one of the few, like, I would say Patricia is one of the few legacy folks actually staying on top of, like, legacy games journalists actually staying top of this issue consistently. She's on that roster with, like, Rhiannon at, like, The Gamer, in my opinion, where it's like she's actually, like, actively reporting on this, which is pretty good. Patricia was my editor for my article actually for Polygon on Subverse, and she did some really good edits. So I know this is an issue that she is, like, also knowledgeable on. She's aware of that this is something that she pays attention to. I think she has some complicated feelings on this matter. Like, I'm not saying that like I'm giving any kind of personal insight or like psychological insight. Like, I'm not trying to be like rude. I think just based on what Patricia has written, based on like her portfolio, I'm sure she has like maybe a little bit more complex feelings about this matter than myself, who I think I've become a little bit more black and white on the matter. of like a more expansive free speech sort of idea as time is going on. I just kind of understand that, like, you know, the barbarians are at the gate. We got to look out for each other. But I think Patricia is increasingly showing herself as an ally to folks affected by this matter. And you know who's a really good ally on this topic? Not Aftermath. Talk about a video game, pre-built PCs, Netflix, Crusader Kings 3, Deftones. The Demon School article looks pretty cool about Silksong, but long story short, something about Vivi and Magic the Gathering, Diablo devs unionized, something about a rhythm game, Crystal Dynamics lays off workers. Well, that's a good story to cover. And the unionized IGN. I mean, what was the last time they even wrote about this issue? When was it? A minute ago now, right? Was it Stripe? Yeah, they haven't even wrote about this since August 13th, bro. Crazy. Last time they touched it was Nathan. And Nathan's the only one they were writing about it, too. This is, like, so embarrassing for Aftermath, dude. Like, this is so actively embarrassing. Where's the articles? Release the articles. It's so embarrassing. Like, you're the independent games press. Future Fragments, let's go. Not sponsored. I bought Future Fragments before the sale today. Go check out their sale, by the way. Anna can steal, devour my data anytime. I will happily do that, Chase. I actually bought Future Fragments before they went on sale because I wanted to give their team as much money as possible, even if it was just like an extra $6 or whatever. All my homies buy Future Fragments. So true. Please do. Please do buy Future Fragments. I hope the new Polygon site also does good work, but we'll see. I hope so too. I've written for Polygon before. I would pitch them to write about this issue, but I feel like everyone would call me like a betrayer yet again and like tell me that I'm like the most evil person in the world. Even though like Polygon is one of the few outlets taking stories about this. So I can't touch it. Heard you need an ID to buy a dildo in Texas. I forget if that's true. Vivi is good in Magic. She's friends shaped. Am I friend shaped? I feel more like I'm like giant shaped. Thank you, Zalji, for the stream, for the follow. Good stream, Anna. Thank you, Nix. I look forward to when I'm ready sitting down with you. No, thank you. Yo, that's weird. I can get an entire set BDSM gym without even popping out ID.